Chapter 351. After Chu Xiu killed Ming Chen with a single punch, the crowd immediately fell into a state of silence. Everyone was a little dumbfounded. The series of changes made it difficult for them to react. They were already shocked when their seventh uncle launched a sneak attack. They did not expect the Xiahou clan, one of the 9 great families, to do something like a sneak attack. Moreover, it was their seventh uncle, a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm, who ambushed a junior like Chu Xiu. However, before they could recover from their shock, another young powerhouse appeared. He blocked their seventh uncle's arrow with the strength of the 5 Qis origin realm. His strength was also incomparably strong. Of course, what shocked them the most was Chu Xiu's decisiveness and ruthlessness. That was the martial monk instructor of the Great Light Temple. Although he was not famous in the Jianghu, he was still considered an elite disciple of the Great Light Temple. However, Chu Xiu killed him without any hesitation. It was really not an ordinary kind of decisiveness. Chu Xiu turned his head and cupped his hands at Lu Fengxian. He smiled and said, "Brother Lu, long time no see." Lu Fengxian also revealed a hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. She said, "Brother Chu, since we parted ways in the northern Yan, your life has been very interesting. Although we haven't seen each other for a long time, the Jianghu is full of legends about you." Chu Xiu then greeted Xie Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin and asked, "You two also heard the news and came here?" Xie Xiaolu took out the 9 dragon coins that represented the 9-branch hall and casually played with them as if he did not care. He said, "After I returned to West Chu, I happened to meet Brother Lu, so I brought him to find Mo Tianlin. He had just stepped into the 3-flower realm and was also released by the Mo family. It was rare for us to meet together, so I was prepared to come to the Guanzhong torture room to find you. I didn't expect to encounter such a thing." Seeing Xie Xiaolu's actions, Chu Xiu also understood. Xie Xiaolu must have met Lu Fengxian and casually pulled him into the 9-branch hall. Lu Fengxian's strength was definitely not inferior to the top 10 on the Longhu leaderboard. Most importantly, he was a lone cultivator with no background. He was definitely the most suitable person to be pulled into the 9-branch hall. Even if Xie Xiaolu did not pull Lu Fengxian into the 9-branch hall in the end, Chu Xiu would find a chance to contact Lu Fengxian. And now, Xie Xiaolu and the others only saw Lu Fengxian's strength, but Chu Xiu knew how terrifying the potential of this young man who looked like a spring breeze was. He was definitely one of the great figures who could dominate the underworld in the future. After exchanging a few pleasantries with everyone, Chu Xiu looked at Xiahou Wujiang and sneered. "I said that if you want to make a move, I'll play with you to the end openly. But now, you're playing those underhanded tricks. How vexing." Xiahou Wujiang frowned, and his expression was a little ugly. Hearing Chu Xiu's sarcasm, he only snorted coldly and did not say anything. Just now, 7th uncle had already sent a message to Xiahou Wujiang, telling him to calm down. Just by himself, he did not have the confidence to deal with Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian working together. Just now, 7th uncle had confidently said that he could kill Ming Chen in 7 arrows. But to kill Chu Xiu, even if he shot all 13 arrows, he did not have the confidence. At most, he could only seriously injure Chu Xiu and force him to retreat. And there was also Lu Fengxian, whose strength he did not know, but who had just blocked him. These two were the top of the 5 energies toward the source. 7th uncle did not have the confidence to deal with the 2 of them working together. And there was also Xie Xiaolu, Mo Tianlin, and Chu Xiu subordinates. If they really fought, both sides would be injured. That teacher Tsen of the Ba Mountain sword sect was an old fox. Just now they had fought so fiercely, but teacher Tsen had not acted. Clearly, he was the one preparing to take advantage in the end. Seeing Xiahou Wujiang's attitude, Chu Xiu frowned. It seemed that Xiahou Wujiang had changed a lot in this period of time. A proud and conceited Xiahou Wujiang was actually not scary. Just like Xiahou Wujiang's appearance at the God Weapon Conference, Chu Xiu had only treated the other party as a clown. At most, he was a clown with a strong background and strength. But now, Xiahou Wujiang was able to let go of his so-called face and decisively let 7th uncle sneak attack him when it was time to act. Even after he failed and was ridiculed by him, he didn't fly into a rage out of humiliation. Such a Xiahou Wujiang was dozens of times more terrifying than the previous arrogant man who only had talent. But since Xiahou Wujiang did not speak, Chu Xiu's side naturally would not take the initiative to act. Although 7th uncle had only shot 1 arrow, It was enough to prove his strength. In a head-on fight in public, Chu Xiao did not have the confidence to win. That was why everyone fell into a strange silence during the battle just now. Chu Xiao and the others still occupied the best position near the entrance of the sky-reaching tower. Neither Teacher Zhen nor Xiahou Wujiang stood out to provoke Chu Xiao, let alone the others. Just as everyone was strangely and quietly waiting for the sky-reaching tower to open, Chu Xiao asked Lu Fengxian telepathically, "Brother Lu, did you have many fortuitous encounters in West Chu during this time?" Chu Xiao felt that his cultivation speed was fast enough. In a short 2 years, he had crossed from Xiantian to the Five Qis origin realm. This kind of speed definitely far surpassed most of the dragon and tiger list martial artists. In the end, Lu Fengxian's speed was not inferior to Chu Xiao's at all, including his accumulation of internal energy. This also made Chu Xiao sigh. Although Lu Fengxian's trajectory had changed under his interference, this great luck had always been with him and had not changed in the slightest. Lu Fengxian smiled and said, "It can't be considered a fortuitous encounter, but there are a lot of good things. Moreover, the World Alliance's Alliance Master Chen is very good to me. I only helped the World Alliance with a few small things, and Alliance Master Chen gave me a lot of things." On the side, Xiao Lu bitterly smiled and said, "Brother Lu, my master sincerely invited you to join the World Alliance. If you can become a disciple of the World Alliance, Master will give you even more things. Even if Master makes you the successor of the World Alliance, I will still be convinced." The World Alliance's Chen Qingdi was very fond of Lu Fengxian. This was something that Xiao Lu had told Chu Xiao before. It was a pity that Lu Fengxian had rejected Chen Qingdi's good intentions. Right now, Lu Fengxian still shook his head and said, "I'm a person who is used to being free and undisciplined. I can't be controlled by a sect or an aristocratic family. I can only disappoint Alliance Master Chen's good intentions. However, if you need my help, don't hesitate to ask. Brother Chu's 9-branch hall is very good. If you need anything, just ask. As long as I, Lu Fengxian, can help, I will absolutely not refuse." Lu Fengxian's personality was like this. People in the Jianghu only sought fame and fortune, but Lu Fengxian wanted to be free and unfettered. In his heart, there was no good or evil, only what he believed to be right and wrong. If he believed that a person deserved to be killed, even if that person was recognized as a chivalrous person in the Jianghu, or a virtuous Buddhist grandmaster, he would still dare to kill them. And if he believed that you were a friend, even if Chu Xiao became the public enemy of the Jianghu in the future and was spurned by thousands of people, Lu Fengxian would still treat him as a friend. Everything was idealistic. This was easy to say, but it was not easy to do. Perhaps it was because of this state of mind that Lu Fengxian's cultivation speed was so fast that even Chu Xiao was amazed. Chu Xiao turned around and chatted with Xiao Lu and Mo Tianlin for a while. The experiences of these two during this time were very simple. Xiao Lu's strength was about to break through to the Three-Flower Realm. After the God Weapon Conference, he took a big trip around Eastern Qi and successfully broke through to the Three-Flower Realm. Although Mo Tianlin was grounded by the Mo family after the God Weapon Conference, he did not embarrass the Mo family. Therefore, he was rewarded with a lot of cultivation resources and successfully broke through to the Three-Flower Realm. However, as soon as they broke through to the Three-Flower Realm, they heard the news that Chu Xiao had killed a great master in the Unity of the World realm. While they were shocked and defeated, they also secretly thought that they did not make friends this time. With Chu Xiao's strength and potential, they could help Chu Xiao now, but in the future, they would probably have to rely on Chu Xiao to help them. Chu Xiao asked, "By the way, how is Luo Feiheng doing recently?" Mo Tianlin chuckled and said, "Brother Chu, you care so much about Feiheng. Are you interested in her?" Chu Xiao waved his hand and said, "Don't mess around. No matter what, she is still a member of our organization. I was just asking casually." Mo Tianlin also casually teased him. In his opinion, although Luo Feiheng was quite beautiful, her personality was not something that ordinary people could handle. She was not suitable to be a wife at all. Only a guy with a screw loose like Xiahou Wujiang would pursue Luo Feiheng relentlessly and even vent his anger on him. That crazy woman, Luo Feiheng, is living a good life. I heard that as soon as she returned to the Luo family, she was reprimanded by the Luo family elders for being enemies with Xiahou Wujiang. You know that crazy woman's personality well. She is not the type to swallow her anger. The next day, she went to the children of the elders one by one. She said that she wanted to learn from them, but in fact, she was ravaging them. She beat them up one by one. She was so ruthless that she almost crippled them. After that, the elders were angry and naturally called her over to reprimand her. They punished her with cultivation resources and made her face the wall. They couldn't really do anything to Luo Fei Hung. In the end, after Luo Fei Hung finished facing the wall, she beat them up one by one. She even threatened that if the elders reprimanded her, she would beat them up again. She directly beat the disciples and elders of the Luo family until they didn't dare to reprimand her. They even gave her a lot of cultivation resources. Apart from not being able to leave the Luo family for the time being, she is living a better life than anyone else. After listening to Mo Tianlin's narration, Chu Xiu was also stunned. No wonder Mo Tianlin called Luo Fei Hung a crazy woman. This kind of behavior was really crazy. If the old scolded me, I would beat the young one. Anyway, we are all from the same family. These people can't really cripple Luo Fei Hung. Perhaps only a woman like Luo Fei Hung could do such a thing. Chapter 352. Mount Deyong temporarily fell into a short period of peace. The ruins of the Tongtian Tower were also slowly expanding outwards. It was estimated that in another day or two, the door to the first floor would be completely opened. During this time, many people came. There were rogue cultivators and warriors from small forces. However, none of them dared to challenge Chu Xiu. The newcomers were not idiots. They would naturally inquire about what had happened during this period of time. Chu Xiu was a madman who dared to kill people from the Great Light Temple. They did not dare to provoke Chu Xiu at this time. Moreover, Chu Xiu's strength was not weak. Although Chu Xiu was not at the unity of heaven and man realm, together with Lu Fengxian, he was fully qualified to fight against Teacher Tsen and Xiahou Wujiang's seventh uncle. Together with Xie Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin, their strength was also very terrifying. Apart from these small characters, there were no important figures during this time. However, on the last day when the Tongtian Tower was about to emerge from the ground, several women came. There were 5 of them. They were all dressed in white, had beautiful looks, and carried thin swords in their hands. Especially the woman in the lead. She had a beautiful appearance and a graceful figure. Every detail of her face seemed to have been sculpted to perfection. She was like a fairy from the heavenly palace. It was a kind of untouchable and inviolable beauty. The moment they saw this woman, almost everyone present was stunned. Even Chu Xiu was the same. There were countless beauties in the Jianghu. Chu Xiu had seen many beauties, but there were only a few who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the woman in front of him. Mei Qinglian was one of them. However, Mei Qinglian's beauty was the kind of cold with a charm. It was as if there was a tempting feeling of ice and fire. It gave people a kind of soul-stealing beauty. On the other hand, Luo Fei Hung couldn't even be compared to this woman. What attracted people to Luo Fei Hung was the heroic spirit that she exuded, giving people a different feeling. However, in terms of facial features, both Mei Qinglian and Luo Fei Hung were inferior to this woman. Facing a beauty of this level, Chu Xiu's eyes only lingered on her face for a few breaths of time before he looked down. Of course, he wasn't looking at some indescribable place, but at their swords. The thin sword was only as wide as a thumb. It didn't look like a long sword, but more like a bamboo pole. Chu Xiu was very familiar with this kind of sword. It had almost taken Chu Xiu's life. This slender sword was the Yu Maiden sword of the Yu Maiden Palace. There was only one such sword in the Jianghu. However, the Yu Maiden Palace was located in Wuyue land, which was quite far from here. How did they get here? Did they also pass by accident? Just as Chu Xiu was deep in thought, the surrounding cultivators seemed to have reacted. Their eyes were filled with admiration and fascination as they discussed and pointed at Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu secretly transmitted his voice to Mo Tianlin. Do you know these martial artists from the Yu Maiden Palace? Mo Tianlin's eyes widened. He looked at Chu Xiu with disbelief and said in surprise, You don't know? One of the 4 great beauties of Wulin, the senior apprentice sister of the Yu Maiden Palace, the famous cloud sword fairy, Yan Fian. You don't know? Chu Xiu asked in reply. Do I need to know? Xie Xiaolu said lightly. If Brother Chu was like you who likes to pay attention to these Jianghu gossips every day, he wouldn't be able to cultivate to his current level. Mo Tianlin waved the fan in his hand and snorted coldly. You don't care about these things, and your cultivation isn't much higher than mine. After exchanging a few words with Xie Xiao Lu out of habit, Mo Tianlin introduced Yan Fian to Chu Xiu in detail. The so-called Four Great Beauties of Jianghu was just a list made up by some busybodies. It couldn't be counted, but it could also indirectly prove Yan Fian's beauty. Of course, Yan Fian didn't rely on her appearance to become famous in Jianghu. This generation of the Yu Maiden Palace's strength in Jianghu wasn't too strong. It was in a period of decline, but Yan Fian outshone the others in the Yu Maiden Palace. Even her fame in Jianghu was very great. Of course, it was because of her strength, not her appearance. Right now, Yan Fian had the strength of the Five Qis origin realm, and was even ranked 8th on the Dragon Tiger leaderboard. She definitely belonged to the top of Jianghu. But at this time, Mo Tianlin transmitted his voice in a low voice. Brother Chu, although this Yan Fian's looks can be said to be peerless, I also advise you to not have any ideas about her. The disciples of the Yu Maiden Palace only have the sword in their lives. It is absolutely impossible for them to marry a man. The disciples of the Yu Maiden Palace who dare to violate the precepts over the years are very miserable, and the men who are related to them are even more miserable. Moreover, this group of women have become somewhat muddle-headed from practicing the sword. There's no reason to reason with women, and there's even less reason with a group of crazy women who practice the sword. Before Chu Xiu could say anything, Lu Fengxian at the side said in astonishment, "Matters of love are human nature. What the Yu Maiden Palace is doing is simply destroying human desire. With such actions, are there no loopholes in their hearts?" Mo Tianlin teased. "What, Brother Lu is somewhat interested in them?" Lu Fengxian shook her head and said, "No, I'm just a little curious. No matter what, the Yu Maiden Palace is a righteous sect. Doing this is somewhat killing their nature." Mo Tianlin and Lu Fengxian hadn't known each other for too long, and they hadn't fought side by side before. Therefore, he only teased her out of habit and didn't joke too much. Hearing this, Mo Tianlin said, "The Yu Maiden Sword Mantra is a sword bestowed by the heavens. The heavenly Tao is emotionless. If you want to cultivate this sword mantra, how can you have human desire?" Therefore, from the beginning, the Yu Maiden Palace didn't allow their disciples to talk about love. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are destroying human desire. When Chu Xiu heard this, he shook his head and thought to himself that it was all bullshit. The heavenly Tao is emotionless, and Tai Shang forgets emotions. It was impossible for a human's thought process to be on par with the heavenly Tao. Or it could be said that at that time, if one cast aside the 7 emotions and 6 desires, they would no longer be human. In Chu Xiu's opinion, the Yu Maiden Palace's rule of forbidding love was purely something that the founder of the Yu Maiden Palace of some generation had thought of. In the end, it had continued until now. The reason was very simple. In the past, Feng Wuling had fallen in love with a female disciple of the Yu Maiden Palace, even to the extent that his heart had died. In the end, he managed to cultivate the Yu Maiden Sword Mantra. Therefore, this thing completely depended on talent. What was the point of talking so much? At this moment, the few female disciples of the Yu Maiden Palace were sizing up the heaven-reaching tower. Yan Fian hugged her thin sword and looked at the heaven-reaching tower without saying a word. One of the female disciples said in surprise, "Senior sister, it's said that a treasure has appeared here. Is this strange round tower it?" Yan Fian nodded and said in a pleasant voice, "It should be it. If I'm not wrong, this should be the heaven-reaching tower left behind by the ancient martial arts sect, the heaven-reaching martial sect. It has appeared in the pugilistic world in the past. This heaven-reaching tower is still intact. There should be many good things in it. We've made the right decision to come this time. Junior Sister Wan, haven't you been nagging about the lack of spiritual medicine given to you by the sect? This time, you should be able to find some in the heaven-reaching tower, or discover some other good things. Bring them back to the sect to exchange." The female disciple called Wan nodded and looked around. She asked the itinerant martial artist standing at the side, "Hey, the few of you, do any of you know what happened here? When will this heaven-reaching tower appear?" Wan's words were somewhat bossy, as if these itinerant martial artists were her servants. If these words were asked by a man, these itinerant martial artists would most likely feel humiliated and angry. However, although Wan's appearance was far from Yan Fian's, she was still a feast for the eyes. The itinerant martial artists who were asked even felt honored. The leader of the Thundercloud stronghold, Chan Yun, was the first to step forward. He smiled and cupped his hands. The heroines of the Yu Palace have arrived at the right time. This heaven-reaching tower is about to appear. With that, Chen Yun recounted everything that happened when Tong Tian Pagoda appeared to the people of the Yu Palace like beans pouring out of a bamboo tube. However, when Chu Xiu was mentioned, the people of the Yu Palace all looked at Chu Xiu. They frowned and actually walked towards Chu Xiu. Everyone present was stunned. What were the people of the Yu Palace trying to do? Were they going to challenge Chu Xiu, or were they trying to use their advantage to stand on the same level as Chu Xiu? When Mo Tianlin saw the scene, he teased Chu Xiu. "Brother Chu, I'm afraid your luck with the ladies is about to arrive." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Luck with the ladies? I'm afraid it's a calamity with the ladies." Apart from Yan Fian, the people of the Yu Palace were all aggressive. From the looks of it, it didn't seem like something good was about to happen. As expected, when they got close, the woman called Wanner lifted her chin and asked, "You are Chu Xiu?" Chu Xiu frowned and nodded, feeling a little uncomfortable. This woman's tone was very problematic. Even if Chu Xiu was an ordinary pugilistic world person, this woman's tone was a little impolite, let alone the fact that Chu Xiu was in the top 6 of the Longhu list. Didn't she even know how to cup her hands and greet him? However, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to lower himself to a woman's level. He only said indifferently, "I am. What about it?" "You killed Feng Wuling?" Wanner asked. Chu Xiu nodded. At the side, Mo Tianlin was still making faces at Chu Xiu. He also knew about Feng Wuling's matter. Chu Xiu had helped the people of the Yu Palace to kill the person they had always wanted to kill. From the looks of it, the people of the Yu Palace wanted to thank Chu Xiu. However, what Wanner said next made everyone present dumbfounded. Wanner used the hilt of her sword to point at Chu Xiu and snorted coldly. "It's fine that you killed Feng Wuling. The Yu Palace was originally prepared to kill him, but you should never have broken the Yu sword of the Yu Palace. The Yu sword of the Yu Palace was bestowed by the ancestral master. Breaking the sword is an insult to the Yu Palace. You have to give the Yu Palace an explanation for this matter." As soon as she said this, everyone present was dumbfounded. No one expected the people of the Yu Palace to say such a thing. The teasing words that Mo Tianlin was about to say were directly held back by him. He had long heard that the women of the Yu Palace were somewhat unreasonable, but he never thought that they would be unreasonable to such an extent. They were simply making trouble for no reason. Chapter 353. Previously, when the people from the Yu Palace mentioned Feng Wuling, everyone present thought that the people from the Yu Palace wanted to thank Chu Xiu for helping them kill this fellow who had shamed the Yu Palace. However, who would have thought that the people from the Yu Palace would actually say such unreasonable words? For a swordsman, their own sword was indeed very important, especially for a sect like the Yu Palace, which had a long history of swords. It was normal for them to value their own sword. However, the problem was that if the sword Chu Xiu broke was in the hands of a warrior from the Yu Palace, the other party could still demand an explanation. However, the sword that Chu Xiu broke was with Feng Wuling. Would Chu Xiu still have to worry about the Yu Palace's sword and be careful not to hurt it at such a critical moment? Chu Xiu immediately sneered and said, "I don't like to reason with people, and I don't want to reason with women like you who don't know what's going on. You don't have the ability to kill Feng Wuling, so I killed him for you. It's fine if you don't thank me, but you still want to demand an explanation from me? This is simply the biggest joke in the world." Hearing what Chu Xiu said, Wanner's face immediately revealed a hint of anger. She was just about to say something when she saw Chu Xiu say expressionlessly, "I rarely attack women, but the condition is that you don't provoke me. It seems like it's not your first day in the underworld. You should know some rules. It's very impolite for a person holding a sword to point the hilt at someone else. Since your master didn't teach you these underworld etiquettes and hierarchy, I'll teach you." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu took a step forward and reached out to grab Wanner. No one present had expected Chu Xiu to attack without any warning. Furthermore, his target was the women from the Yu Palace. They were all stunned and only reacted after a while. Wanner's strength was not strong. She was only in the inner gang realm. She did not react until Chu Xiu made his move. Yan Fian's expression suddenly changed. The Yu Maiden's sword, which was glowing with a faint blue light, suddenly appeared in her hand. She stabbed out with the sword, like a wisp of smoke. The seemingly simple sword force had already arrived in front of Chu Xiao in the blink of an eye. Chu Xiao's figure moved, and his hand formed the wisdom fist seal without a change in expression. In an instant, the area within a radius of 100 feet became his Gang Qi domain. Because the distance between the two sides was too close, under Chu Xiao's wisdom fist seal, all of the Yu Nu Palace disciples were enveloped within the range of the wisdom fist seal's aura domain. Apart from Yan Fian who could still move, everyone else was confined. Under the wisdom fist seal, one could easily defeat a country. For an ancient martial art practitioner like Chu Xiao who was good at close combat, it was simply a nightmare to let him get close to her. Even though Yan Fian's strength was not weak, she could not do anything to Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao's left hand grabbed towards Wan and his right hand formed the great Vajra wheel seal to block the sword, pushing it away. However, Yan Fian's sword force suddenly changed, and a strange dim light bloomed on the tip of the sword. It was as if it could pierce through the heaven and earth, and it stabbed towards Chu Xiao. The Yu Maiden Sword Codex's sword technique was naturally formed. Yan Fian's understanding of the Yu Maiden Sword Codex was not inferior to Feng Wuling. This sword already carried some of the might of heaven and earth, and it was not brought about by her realm, but by her cultivation in the Yu Maiden Sword Codex. However, at such a close range, Yan Fian's sword technique had no room to be used at all. Chu Xiao held his saber in a reverse grip, and slashed out with a torrential demonic aura, once again blocking Yan Fian's sword. At this moment, his left hand was already about to grab Wan Er. Wan Er screamed and instinctively stabbed out with the Yu Maiden sword in her hand. However, a trace of golden light bloomed in Chu Xiao's hand. It was still the great Vajra wheel seal. However, this time, Chu Xiao's great Vajra wheel seal did not directly strike down. Instead, he grabbed the Yu Maiden sword in Wan Er's hand and crushed it. Although the Yu Maiden sword of the Yu Maiden Palace was the same, there was a huge difference. The Yu Maiden sword in everyone's hands was of a different level, and the effects were also different. For example, the Yu Maiden sword in Wan Er's hand was only a fourth transformation elementary precious weapon. Of course, it could not stop Chu Xiao's great Vajra wheel seal. Retreating, Chu Xiao said indifferently, "Previously, you said that crushing Feng Wuling's Yu Maiden sword was an insult to your Yu Maiden Palace? Then you are wrong. Right now, I am the one who is insulting your Yu Maiden Palace." The few female disciples of the Yu Maiden Palace had darkened expressions. Wan Er, who had her sword crushed by Chu Xiao, was so angry that her eyes turned red. The only one who could still maintain her composure was Yan Fian. She frowned and said, "Official Chu, one did use some inappropriate words just now, but you didn't have to be so ruthless and crush her sword, right? You are an expert ranked 6th on the Dragon and Tiger leaderboard. Wan Er is just a little girl who has just stepped into the pugilistic world and doesn't know the rules. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by the people of the pugilistic world for bullying her like this?" Chu Xiao squinted his eyes and looked at Yan Fian. Of course, his gaze was not lecherous. Instead, it was sizing her up. This woman was not a simple character. That Wan Er didn't know the rules of the pugilistic world. How could she, a young elite ranked in the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger leaderboard, not know? In the end, she did not stop Wan Er just now. But now, she spoke of Chu Xiao as if he was a shameless person who bullied a weak woman. Xiahou Wujiang laughed coldly from behind and said, "Miss Yan, you are wrong. This Chu Xiao is not someone who has tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. He has already been scolded by the people of the pugilistic world countless times, but he still has the nerve to continue mingling in the pugilistic world. He is not worried about his reputation." Chu Xiao cast a glance at Xiahou Wujiang and said coldly, "Xiahou Wujiang, this has nothing to do with you. If you are not convinced, and want to fight before the Tower of Babel opens, I will also accompany you to the end." Seeing Xiahou Wujiang laugh coldly and not say anything, Chu Xiao turned his gaze to Yan Fian and said expressionlessly, "I am not used to reasoning with people, and I am even less used to reasoning with women. I did not want to provoke the Yu Nu Palace, but if you insist on finding trouble with me because of some inexplicable matter, then fine, I will also accept it." What Chu Xiao said was the truth. Although his ability to cause trouble was a little strong, the premise was that he would be able to obtain benefits after causing trouble. He had no enmity with this group of women from the Yu Nu Palace, but they came to find trouble with him because of some inexplicable reason. Fine then, Chu Xiao could only accept it. Under normal circumstances, Chu Xiao would not hit women, but the premise was that they did not provoke him too much. Lu Fengxian stood up, cupped her hands and said in a deep voice, "Miss, what you said is a little too much. Last time when Brother Chu fought with that Feng Wuling, he was at the three-flower realm of acupoint against unity of heaven and man. Every step was filled with killing intent. Not to mention the broken sword, Brother Chu was lucky to be able to survive. Why would he care about the sword?" Yan Fian glanced at Lu Fengxian but did not say anything. She did not know Lu Fengxian. Previously, when Chen Yuan mentioned Lu Fengxian, he only said that he was Chu Xiao's reinforcements. He did not go into detail about how Lu Fengxian cut down the seventh uncle's arrow with a halberd. Therefore, Yan Fian subconsciously thought that Lu Fengxian was just a nobody. At this time, Mo Tianlin also stood up and said, "Miss Yan, the stubborn rules of the Yu Palace need to be changed. If the sword was in the hands of the people from the Yu Palace, it would indeed be an insult to the Yu Palace if Chu Xiao broke it. However, the sword was in the hands of that Feng Wuling. What you are doing is a bit unreasonable." Xie Xiaolu was a man of few words. He just stood beside Mo Tianlin and said indifferently, "You also need to be reasonable in the martial world. Of course, some powers have the right to be unreasonable, but it is clear that the Yu Palace does not have that right now." Mo Tianlin and Xie Xiaolu were backed by the Mo family of Shangyang, one of the 9 great families, and the other by the World Alliance of West Chu. Neither of them were to be trifled with. Their weight was not something that Lu Fengxian could compare with. Yan Fian was silent for a while then said, "What you said makes sense. However, just now, official Chu broke Wanner's sword in front of so many people. The Yu Palace will remember this matter. If there is a chance in the future, we will definitely find official Chu for advice." After saying that, Yan Fian retreated with her people. Wanner shouted unwillingly, "Senior sister." Yan Fian frowned and said, "Wanner, don't mess around." Among these Yu Palace disciples, Yan Fian's prestige was still very high. Once she spoke, even if Wanner was unwilling, she could only pout and leave. After they left, Chu Xiao frowned and asked Mo Tianlin, "Why are the people of the Yu Palace all like this? Do these women really think they are the leaders of the 5 great sword sects?" Mo Tianlin smiled bitterly and said, "Just now I said that these women are a bit confused from practicing the sword. Looking at them now, they have become even worse. But Brother Chu, this is only because of you. If it was anyone else, they would not have fought. After all, the Yu Palace used to be glorious in the past. All the sects in the martial world will give them face. The most important thing is that the Yu Palace is filled with beautiful women. Facing beautiful women, everyone has to be patient and give them preferential treatment. If your attitude just now was not so unyielding and patiently explain to the other party, with us helping you, this matter would probably be over. But now, you broke another sword of the Yu Palace in front of everyone. I'm afraid this matter will not end so well." Chu Xiao smiled and asked, "Do I look like I have a good temper and patience?" Mo Tianlin thought about it and shook his head. This was also the fault of the Yu Palace for courting death. Chu Xiao's attitude was unyielding and his murderous nature was rare in this world. Just based on Wanner's attitude just now, Chu Xiao only crushed her sword and did not cripple her. This was already being merciful and protective of the fairer sex. Among the 4 of them, probably only Mo Tianlin and Lu Fengxian could patiently explain this matter. Mo Tianlin's attitude towards women had always been good, and Lu Fengxian's character was also good. If it was Xie Xiaolu, he would probably have directly slashed with his sword. Mo Tianlin said, "But it's fine to offend them. The Yu Palace's current strength is not too strong." Among the 5 great sword sects, the Yu Palace can only be ranked at the bottom. Last time Madame Xiaoho shielded Feng Wuling, the Yu Palace came to demand an explanation. In the end, they did not get anything and were easily deceived by Madame Xiaoho. Chapter 354. Chu Xiao didn't take the people from the Yu Palace seriously. They were just a declining sect. The pugilistic world was somewhat unfair to women, but at the same time, it also gave them preferential treatment. Other than Chu Xiao, who did not have tender feelings for the fairer sex and would fall out with her at the drop of a hat, most people would not choose to be so ruthless. But at the same time, most people in the Jianghu were very rational. Everyone was concerned about benefits and strength, which had nothing to do with gender. There was only one flaw in a sect where women were the leaders, and that was that they were easily swayed by emotions. They were too emotional and not rational, so this caused a lot of unnecessary trouble. The Yu Nu Palace's aggressive action of finding trouble with the Xiahou clan was a good example. As one of the top 9 aristocratic families, the Xiahou clan's strength was several times or even more than 10 times that of the Yu Nu Palace. With the Yu Nu Palace's current strength, they would be asking for humiliation if they aggressively asked for an explanation from the Xiahou clan. They wouldn't get anything. In the end, that was indeed the case. The people from the Yu Nu Palace were deceived by the Xiahou clan with just a few words. They returned empty-handed and lost their reputation for no reason. If it were any other faction, they would have dealt with this situation in a low-profile manner. They had to make a big fuss, and in the end, they lost face. Chu Xiu was now backed by the Guanzhong torture room. Although Guan Siyu, the hallmaster, hadn't fought in the Jianghu for a long time, her strength wasn't just for show. Moreover, the Guanzhong torture room's strength wasn't limited to what it showed on the surface. The true elite combat power of the Guanzhong torture room was in the criminal division. These people knew nothing about tracing traces and investigating cases. They were only good at killing. All these years, the Guanzhong torture room had been able to survive in the cracks. It wasn't enough to rely on Guan Siyu alone. More importantly, the Guanzhong torture room had the strength that wasn't inferior to the top sections. At this moment, the white light emitted by the Tower of Babel became denser and denser. It was almost about to open. Chu Xiu whispered to Mo Tianlin and the others, "Be careful after we enter the Tong Tian Tower. There might be something waiting for us inside." Mo Tianlin said in surprise, "Shouldn't we be most careful of Xiahou Wujiang's group later? There are living creatures in Tong Tian Tower?" Chu Xiu said, "That's hard to say. In ancient times, those guys from the Tong Tian martial sect would study anything and dared to study anything. They dared to cultivate the martial arts of the Taoist, Buddhist, and devil sects at the same time. Moreover, there were all kinds of hidden weapons, formations, alchemy, and the like. In any case, as long as it was something that existed in the Jianghu, they would study it. They even dared to raise some evil and ferocious beasts that they caught from the wild mountains. Some of these things were already extinct, but it was unknown if there were any left in Tong Tian Tower. At present, this Tong Tian Tower itself is an existence that combines the Tao of array and the Tao of refining to the peak. Even if there is no one in it, the formation is still operating automatically, and some living creatures in it can go dormant. Moreover, we are foreign enemies at the moment. For the formation of Tong Tian Tower itself, as long as we enter it, we will be directly judged as intruders. At that time, it is unknown what we will encounter." Chu Xiu didn't know some of the details of the original plot, but it was clear that there were still some dangers in this well-preserved Tong Tian Tower. Now, Chu Xiu also gave them a reminder first. At this moment, the light above Tong Tian Tower bloomed to the extreme. The originally closed door slowly opened. Chu Xiu and the others occupied the best position and directly entered. As soon as Xiahou Wujiang and others saw Chu Xiu's action, they also hurriedly entered. As soon as he stepped into Tong Tian Tower, Chu Xiu felt dizzy, and there was a vast expanse of whiteness in front of him. At this time, he had been shrouded in a thick fog, and he could hardly see anything more than 10 feet away with his naked eye. There was no movement. It seemed that after entering Tong Tian Tower, the formation's random teleportation had been activated, and there should be no one around Chu Xiu. Of course, for warriors, sometimes the naked eye was not so important. The perception of warriors was even more sensitive than the naked eye. But in this Tong Tian Tower, under the suppression of the formation, Chu Xiu's perception was also suppressed, and the range was even less than that of the naked eye, only about 10 feet. Taking out a formation plate, the original white jade-like formation plate had 5 different colored light spots, representing 5 different directions. This was the 5 elements formation that Chu Xiu had buried on Mount Diang before. At this time, in the fog, the naked eye and perception were suppressed to the extreme. It was easy to get lost and go around in circles without a clear direction. Moreover, although this 5 elements array formation was outside of Sky Split Tower, as long as someone was in that position, they would still be able to detect some movement. This would also make it convenient for Chu Xiu to meet up with LV Fengxian and the others. In the fog, Chu Xiu did not know which direction the good things in Tong Tian Tower were, so he kept walking in one direction. Although Tong Tian Tower looked very big from the outside, it was definitely not as spacious as the inside, which was like a small city. The entire interior of Tong Tian Tower had been enveloped by the space formation, so even Chu Xiu did not know how big it was. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, Chu Xiu suddenly stopped and looked at the ground. There was a broken hand on the ground, and a large amount of blood was scattered on the ground. Looking at the edge of the broken hand, Chu Xiu could not help but raise his eyebrows. The broken hand was not cut off, but was bitten off by something. Chu Xiu had been in the Guanzhong torture hall for such a long time. Although he had not studied things like traces and judging cases, he could be said to have been influenced by what he had seen and heard. He could still see these things. It seemed that there were still living things in Tong Tian Tower. He did not know what messy things the Tong Tian martial sect had locked up in Tong Tian Tower in ancient times. At this moment, there was suddenly a fishy wind behind Chu Xiu. It was extremely sudden, and there was not the slightest sign in advance. Chu Xiu turned back to look, and a ferocious beast head full of sharp teeth was less than a foot away from his head, but Chu Xiu did not notice it at all. However, Chu Xiu's eyes did not have the slightest hint of panic. The heavenly demon dance in his hand slashed out a black ray of light, and the beast's head directly fell to the ground. Crimson blood splattered everywhere, and the 3-meter-tall body crashed to the ground. Chu Xiu looked at the corpse on the ground and could not help but frown. He muttered, "What is the Tong Tian martial sect researching? What is this thing?" The giant beast that Chu Xiu had killed did not look like any living creature he knew. Its head looked like a bear, but not a bear. 4 canine teeth were exposed, and its body was as strong as a lion or tiger. The strangest thing was that this thing had 6 legs, and looked similar to those fierce beasts in the legends. Humans were the spirits of all living creatures. They could sense the heaven and earth, and cultivate martial arts. Legend said that they could even shatter the void and achieve immortality. Wild beasts were also one of the spirits of heaven and earth. Because they mistakenly consumed some kind of elixir, their spiritual wisdom increased greatly, and they were not inferior to humans. They also had all kinds of strange powers, and such existences were called spiritual beasts. It was said that the World Alliance's Chen Qingdi raised a black tiger, which he obtained from the wild mountains of West Chu. It was this kind of legendary spiritual beast, and it was unusually intelligent. Except for the fact that it could not speak, it was almost no different from a human. Moreover, this black tiger's speed was simply astonishing. It was said that there was once a small sect leader in the physical invulnerability realm who spoke disrespectfully to Chen Qingdi. In the end, everyone only saw a black shadow flash by, and that person's head had already disappeared. However, that black tiger did not seem to move, and was still lying lazily at the feet of Chen Qingdi, but it was playing with a human head in its claws. This kind of spiritual beast could only be encountered, and not sought. It was even said that in the ancient times, some martial artists specially developed martial arts suitable for spiritual beasts to increase their strength. If the existence of spiritual beasts was said to be an accident, and their original bodies were just ordinary wild beasts, then the fierce beasts were the terrifying existences left behind from the ancient times. To be able to be called the existence of fierce beasts, they were born with all kinds of powerful and strange powers, and relied on devouring elixirs and powerful martial artists to grow. In the ancient times, there were many such fierce beasts, and in some ancient books, there were many records of ancient martial artists fighting with all kinds of fierce beasts. However, after experiencing the great calamity of the ancient times, these fierce beasts were almost all dead. Although after that calamity, 99% of the sects were buried, and countless martial artists died, the only advantage of the human race being able to survive for so many years was the inheritance of words. Although those sects were destroyed, and the people were gone, their inheritance was left behind in the secret box, and was discovered by later generations. They continued to practice martial arts, and in the end, it became the current golden age of martial arts. As for the fierce beasts, they completely relied on the inheritance of blood. Once they died, there was nothing left, and even reproduction became a problem. Now, the fierce beasts were no longer a big enemy of the human race. Occasionally, people would find some fierce beasts in those remote mountains and forests, and those martial artists would treat them as walking treasures. They would immediately gather a large number of martial artists to kill them, and use their flesh and blood to refine pills, and their scales and bones to refine weapons. Although Chu Xiu had never seen a fierce beast, the thing he killed now had the appearance of a standard fierce beast, but its strength was very weak, and it did not have any strange power. It was killed by Chu Xiu's saber. It was estimated that if a martial artist of the Xiantian realm wanted to kill this thing, it would be easy. The martial artists who were swallowed by this thing were also very unlucky. Either they had not reached the Xiantian realm, or because of the thick fog, they were sneak attacked. At this moment, there was a sudden roar of wild beasts in the distance, and there were also some martial artists crying. When Chu Xiu got closer, he saw that it was actually a strange beast with a bird's body and a beast's head. It even had sharp claws and wings, and it was the size of a tiger or leopard, chasing after two martial artists. The strength of these strange beasts was also not strong, but they were densely packed, and it seemed to be endless, making people's scalps tingle. Chapter 355. The two people who were being chased by a group of exotic beasts were lone cultivators. Their strength had just reached the innate realm. These strange exotic beasts were actually very weak. In Chu Xiu's opinion, they were not even comparable to ordinary lions and tigers. However, the problem was that there were too many of them. They were densely packed together, making one's scalp tingle. There was no end to them no matter how many they killed. Only when a martial artist reached the martial Dao Grandmaster realm and condensed the martial Dao true core could they convert the power of heaven and earth into their own strength at will. Only then could they truly be unafraid of taking turns to fight. They could ignore numbers and fight an army of 10,000 alone. Just like when Chu Xiu fought a group of people alone, he actually only killed them until they were terrified. If those martial artists really wanted to kill Chu Xiu, and none of them were afraid of death, Chu Xiu would have died several times over. Humans were afraid of death, but obviously these exotic beasts were not. Even though the two lone cultivators killed as they ran, the exotic beasts seemed to have been starved for tens of thousands of years. They all chased after them with bloodshot eyes. At this moment, the two lone cultivators also saw Chu Xiu. Their eyes suddenly lit up, and they immediately ran in Chu Xiu's direction. When they ran to Chu Xiu, the exotic beasts had also chased after them. The two then shouted, "Official Chu, save us!" An elusive smile suddenly appeared on Chu Xiu's face. "Actually, I'm a person who occasionally shows mercy. If you beg me sincerely, I can save you." One of them heard Chu Xiu say that he would save them, and his eyes lit up. However, the other felt that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu's tone and immediately took a step back. At this point, Chu Xiu's face suddenly darkened, and he said coldly, "But what I hate the most is when people play these tricks in front of me. Remember, in your next life, play as many tricks as you have the strength. Playing such tricks in front of people who are much stronger than you is pathetic and ridiculous." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu directly blasted out with his palm. The powerful palm force directly blasted the two people into the herd of beasts. Even the person who wanted to retreat before was not spared. A terrifying chewing sound suddenly came from the herd of beasts. Almost in the blink of an eye, the two innate realm experts were directly bitten into a cloud of blood mist. The expression on Chu Xiu's face did not change at all. These two people were courting death. They really thought that Chu Xiu could not see through their little tricks. They actually led the beast herd to his side before asking for help. Obviously, they planned to let an expert like Chu Xiu help them resist. Actually, even if they didn't do this, Chu Xiu would also investigate in the direction of the beast herd to see what was going on and why there were so many beasts there. It would be fine if he could save them while he was at it. At this moment, after the countless beasts swallowed the two innate realm experts, the ferocious aura became thicker, and they all surged towards Chu Xiu. It wasn't too difficult to deal with a beast herd of this level. As long as one stepped into the physical invulnerability realm, a martial artist who could externalize their aura would be able to cause great damage to them. Chu Xiu formed the outer lion seal with his hand. As his fingers tapped on the seal, a loud sound rang out, but it was like a thunderclap. Within a radius of several zhang, all the exotic beasts bled from their 7 orifices and died on the spot. In the past, Chu Xiu's opponents were too strong. Hence, the outer lion seal was used by Chu Xiu as a support-type martial technique, disrupting his opponents at crucial moments. However, to these powerless exotic beasts, it didn't take much effort to kill them. As Chu Xiu walked over, the ground was practically covered with the corpses of those exotic beasts. They were densely packed together, creating a spectacular sight. At this moment, the silhouette of a palace finally appeared in front of him. There seemed to be quite a few people standing there. When the exotic beasts behind Chu Xiao saw the palace, they seemed to feel a sense of fear towards it. Even when Chu Xiao slaughtered them along the way, they didn't feel any fear. However, when they saw the palace, they immediately hid their claws and teeth and left with their tails between their legs. At this moment, the martial artists in front of the palace were also dumbfounded when they saw Chu Xiao. Seeing Chu Xiao's arrival, they naturally saw the corpses on the ground behind Chu Xiao. In fact, most of them had been chased here by the exotic beasts. It was just that they had a hard time escaping. How could they be as relaxed as Chu Xiao? They even suspected that if Chu Xiao was allowed to continue killing like this, would Chu Xiao kill all of these things? At this moment, there was someone familiar to Chu Xiao among the group. More accurately, it should be an enemy. It was Teachertsen of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Seeing Chu Xiao's arrival, Teachertsen also snorted coldly. With Teachertsen's cultivation at the unity of heaven and man realm, it didn't take much effort for him to kill these exotic beasts. However, he had to use sword techniques to kill his way here. It wasn't as easy as Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao glanced at the palace in front of him. The main structure was still constructed from materials similar to Yu Bai Yu. However, the entrance was a heavy bronze door. Previously, several martial artists had tried to open it, but none of them had been able to do so. Even when Teachertsen had tried, he had only managed to shake the door slightly and not completely open it. Everyone looked at Chu Xiao and Teacher Cen. If the two of them worked together, they should be able to completely open the door. However, there was a great enmity between the two of them. Chu Xiao had killed Teachertsen's disciple. Could the two of them work together? At this time, a middle-aged martial artist in his 40s with a simple and honest demeanor stepped forward and said with a smile, "Lord Chu, Eldertsen, the two of you are the strongest here, so it will be up to you to open this door. There are countless treasures in the sky-reaching tower. It is easy to resolve grudges. However, this treasure will only appear once. How about resolving grudges in the future?" Chu Xiao sized up the bronze door and said indifferently, "Sure. Anyway, someone is looking for me for revenge. It's not like I'm the one looking for revenge." Teachertsen also thought about it. In the end, he nodded with a slightly ugly expression. Seeing that the two of them had agreed, everyone retreated to the side. Chu Xiao shrugged and didn't say anything else. He formed the great Vajra wheel seal and mobilized all the vital energy in his body. In an instant, the light of Buddha shone brightly in his hand as he attacked the bronze door. Teachertsen didn't do anything. The long sword in his hand instantly became incomparably heavy. It was as magnificent as the mountains and rivers. Once the sword aura appeared, it directly condensed into a thick sword aura that was more than 10 feet long. With a boom, it also slashed at the bronze door. This was one of the sword techniques of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect, the Splendid Mountain and River Sword. The sword techniques of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect were actually not very famous. The Night Rain of Ba Mountain and the Purple Lightning Thunderbolt evolved into 8 sword techniques. Although none of them were too weak, they were also not too strong. In terms of pure strength, the Splendid Mountain and River Sword was the strongest sword technique that Teachertsen could master. However, he was a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm after all. His own strength was not weak. Under the combined efforts of the two people, a gap was blasted open in the door. However, it was enough for several people to enter and exit. Chu Xiao and Teachertsen entered first. The others followed closely behind. However, when everyone saw the scene in the palace, they immediately gasped. Their eyes were filled with shock, including Teachertsen's. Chu Xiao, after all, had transmigrated and could be considered as someone who had seen the world. After seeing the scene, he was only slightly stunned. He then murmured, "This sky-reaching martial sect really knows how to play." The things in the entire hall were extremely evil. It was like a slaughterhouse. There were broken limbs and remains of various ferocious beasts everywhere. Some had already decayed after tens of thousands of years and would shatter at the slightest touch. The blood stains on the ground had even turned black. Of course, these were not the strangest things. The strangest thing was that there were many dead test subjects in the surrounding cages. They were all strangely shaped. Some had the head of a deer and the body of a bird. There were also 8-legged lizards that looked like spiders. Combined with the corpses of these ferocious beasts and these strangely shaped test subjects, Chu Xiu finally understood how these things had come about. The people of the sky-reaching martial sect had been conducting biochemical experiments here? However, at this moment, Teacher Tsun said in a slightly excited tone, as expected of an ancient martial arts sect. The sky-reaching martial sect's idea can be called genius. It is a pity that they did not succeed because of the great ancient calamity. Otherwise, they would have benefited the entire martial arts world. A warrior at the side muttered, creating these monsters can benefit the entire martial arts world? Other than scaring people, what's the use? They don't look delicious. Teacher Tsun glared at the warrior and snorted coldly. What do you know? The sky-reaching martial sect did this to mass-produce ferocious beasts. The blood of ferocious beasts can be used to refine pills, their scales can be used to refine weapons, and their bones can be used to set up arrays. It is not an exaggeration to say that their entire body is a treasure. However, ferocious beasts are hard to find and they are extremely powerful. It is not easy to kill them. It seems that the sky-reaching martial sect is preparing to transplant the blood of ferocious beasts into ordinary ferocious beasts, creating ferocious beasts out of thin air and providing an endless supply of ferocious beast materials for the martial arts world. However, it is a pity that the sky-reaching martial sect failed in the end. The monsters they created can survive, but their bodies did not retain the blood of ferocious beasts. They are just stronger and more ferocious than ordinary beasts. Chu Xiu also nodded. Teacher Tsun was indeed worthy of being a teacher for many years. His analysis was clear and logical. The people from the sky-reaching martial sect were very innovative. However, in Chu Xiu's opinion, the possibility of success did not seem high. What they were doing was almost equivalent to creating things. It was already not easy to piece together those ferocious beasts into strange shapes and allow them to continue to survive, let alone turn ferocious beasts into ferocious beasts. The crowd continued to walk towards the depths of the hall. The center of the hall appeared in front of everyone, and it made everyone's eyes light up. There was a formation in the center of the hall. The light of the formation was a little dim, but it was still lit up. A giant heart that was 9 inches in size floated above the formation. Although its surface was already frozen, everyone could still feel the vitality within it. Chapter 356. Every part of a fierce beast was a treasure. This was what Teacher Tsun had just said. The broken limbs of the fierce beasts in the hall had already decayed and were basically useless. However, this frozen heart was clearly still alive. Although the crowd did not know what this heart was, it was definitely a treasure. However, just as everyone approached the formation, mechanical sounds rang out from the surroundings of the formation. A mechanical puppet clad in black armor and wielding a heavy sword rose from the ground. The moment they saw the mechanical puppet, someone immediately exclaimed, "It's the Thousand Machines Sect's black-armored warrior." In ancient times, the Thousand Machines Sect not only produced all kinds of hidden weapons, but they were also famous for all kinds of strange mechanical devices. This black-armored warrior was the most famous puppet of the Thousand Machines Sect. It was said that the black-armored warrior was composed of 36,000 mechanical devices, and its body was inscribed with 360 miniature arrays. It could automatically absorb vitality from heaven and earth. As long as the arrays were not destroyed, the black-armored warrior would not die. The strength of this black-armored warrior was also incomparably strong. Its entire body was made of adamantine meteoric iron, which could withstand all attacks below the level of a divine weapon. The arrays inside could also withstand the internal energy of a unity of heaven and man realm expert. Unless a martial Dao Grandmaster attacked, it would be very difficult for a unity of heaven and man realm expert to defeat it. The black-armored warrior was very famous in the pugilistic world. In the past, the true martial sect, one of the 3 great Dao sects, had once excavated 8 black-armored warriors from an ancient ruin. A martial Dao Grandmaster had personally subdued them and changed the arrays inside, allowing them to guard the true martial sect's true martial hall. Now that this black-armored warrior was guarding the place, it was almost impossible for anyone to obtain the heart. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly transmitted his voice to Teacher Tsun. "Elder Tsun, how about joining forces? If we don't get rid of this black-armored warrior, no one will be able to obtain the fierce beast's heart. This thing is so big, after the matter is over, we can split it in half." The corner of Teacher Tsun's mouth revealed a trace of a sneer. "Chu Xiu, you killed my disciple, and now you want to join forces with me? You are simply delusional." Chu Xiu sneered and said, Alright, Eldertson, stop acting. It's true that you value Zhang Bai Tao, but you absolutely don't value him enough to risk your own interests for him. Back in Northern Yen, after I killed Zhang Bai Tao, I joined the Blue Dragon Society. You can easily find out if you ask Wind Sweeping Tower. Why didn't you come to the Northern Yen to take revenge on me after such a long time? It's all because I have the Blue Dragon Society behind me. You're afraid that you'll come all the way to Northern Yen to take revenge on me, and you'll stay in Northern Yen forever. After I joined the Guanzhong torture room, I was even closer to West Chu. So why didn't you take revenge on me? Wasn't it because they were afraid of the Guanzhong torture room's strength? Also, when I fought with Ming Chen of the Great Light Temple before, if you were really determined to kill me, I might not be able to kill Ming Chen so easily. In the end, why didn't you make a move? Wasn't it because you were worried that something might go wrong and cause you to be injured before entering the Sky Split Tower? Eldertson, you have more than one disciple, but this is the only time you will encounter the birth of the Sky Split Tower. Are you going to let go of your grudges and join hands with me, or are you going to watch the treasures and leave? It's your choice. Chu Xiu's words made Teachertson feel as though his heart was seen through. This made his face faintly reveal anger from embarrassment, but he didn't explode. Chu Xiu was right. In this world, as long as you wanted to take revenge, no matter how difficult or dangerous it wouldn't be an excuse. Just like when Chu Xiu crippled Xin Bai and Azure Watersword Sect's Lu Gongyuan, he valued Xin Bai even more than his own son. In the end, Xin Bai was crippled by Chu Xiu. Lu Gongyuan also had misgivings about the Guanzhong torture room and the current Azure Watersword sect. Therefore, he forcefully endured and didn't seek revenge from Chu Xiu. He didn't even seek an explanation from the Guanzhong torture room. Teachertson did indeed like Zhang Baitao as a disciple, but it was far less than how Lu Gongyuan valued Xin Bai. Just like what Chu Xiu said, he still had many disciples. He couldn't disregard everything and give up his own safety to seek revenge from Chu Xiu just for Zhang Baitao. After a moment of silence, Teachertson transmitted a voice in a soft voice. With just the two of us, can we defeat this black armor warrior? This thing is very troublesome to deal with. Any slash from a divine weapon would be useless against it. The internal array can also withstand the inner force of a unity of heaven and man realm expert. Teachertson didn't agree to join forces, but his words were basically equivalent to agreement. However, Teachertson didn't have much face and was embarrassed to say that he wanted to join forces with Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu revealed a smirk and spoke indifferently. No matter how strong the mechanism is, it is still a mechanism. Even if it has the support of countless arrays, it is still a brainless piece of trash. There will always be a way to deal with it. However, we have to clean up the others as well. We don't want a group of scoundrels to take advantage of us after we go through so much trouble to obtain the item. Teachertson turned around to look at the rogue cultivators. At this moment, they were also staring at the frozen heart with greedy eyes. The black armor warrior wasn't easy to deal with. If they went through so much trouble to defeat the black armor warrior, it would indeed be a waste if the scoundrels took advantage of them. However, Teachertson frowned and said, "Are we just going to chase them away like this? But they haven't even tried to snatch it." After all, Teachertson was a member of the Ba Mountain Sword sect and could be considered a veteran of the Zhonghu who had been famous for a long time. With his status, he still wanted his reputation. He didn't want to do something that would attract too much criticism. Chu Xiu shrugged and said, "Eldertson cares about his reputation, but I, Chu Xiu, already have a bad reputation in the Zhonghu. I don't care about these things. Never mind. Let me be the bad guy." As he spoke, Chu Xiu turned and walked towards those people. Previously, Chu Xiu and Teachertson had been communicating using their internal energy. With their cultivation, the others naturally couldn't hear what they were saying. Seeing Chu Xiu walk over, these people were stunned. They were about to say something when they saw Chu Xiu point at the door and say, "Get out." Everyone was stunned. Immediately someone said unhappily, "Official Chu, what do you mean by this? What right do you have to let us out?" Chu Xiu said coolly, "Don't you know what I mean? Don't think about things that you shouldn't think about, and don't take things that you shouldn't take. This thing is right here. Even if I don't snatch it, you won't be able to take it. Since that's the case, what is the point of you staying here?" Chu Xiu's words exposed the thoughts of these people. But with the treasure in front of them, there would always be people who would be blinded by profit. Someone laughed dryly and said, "Official Chu's words are a bit too much. We have never thought about snatching something from Official Chu's hands. Can't we just stand in this hall and look at some other things?" Chu Xiao shook his head and said, "I'm a person who rarely talks reason with others because I've always believed that fists and swords are more useful than reasoning. It's rare for me to reason with you, but in the end you don't listen. You can't blame me for this. It's not a good habit to not learn from your mistakes." Hearing Chu Xiao's words, the expressions of everyone present immediately changed. There were several cultivators from Eastern Qi who quietly stepped back and slipped out of the hall. These cultivators from Eastern Qi had heard of Chu Xiao's fierce reputation. If they wanted to snatch something from Chu Xiao's mouth, they would probably lose their lives before they could even touch it. As for the cultivators from Western Chu, most of what they knew about Chu Xiao came from hearsay. At this time, they were still clamoring that Chu Xiao's actions were too overbearing and that Tong Tian Tower didn't belong to him alone. Chu Xiao sneered and directly grabbed the cultivator who was clamoring the loudest. That cultivator's strength could not be considered weak, having a cultivation of the internal strength realm. But in the hands of an expert like Chu Xiao, he simply could not withstand a single blow. With a loud explosion, that cultivator's aura shield was directly crushed by Chu Xiao. His entire body was lifted up by Chu Xiao and thrown to the side of the black-armored soldier. The black-armored soldier had no intelligence and completely relied on the settings of the array to determine who was friend or foe. Someone entered its attack range. The black-armored soldier raised the heavy sword in its hand. It seemed heavy, but its figure was as fast as lightning. It directly cut that cultivator in half. The severed limbs and blood sprinkled on the black-armored soldier's body, looking somewhat evil. But the black-armored soldier still slowly walked back to its original position and continued to hold the heavy sword in its hand, looking at the crowd with its empty eyes. Chu Xiao turned back and smiled at the crowd. "Who's next?" Everyone present was stunned. Without even looking back, they directly turned and fled. With the previous example in mind, they no longer doubted Chu Xiao's courage to kill. Teacherson took a deep look at Chu Xiao. Although Chu Xiao had killed his disciple, it was only today that he truly understood what kind of person Chu Xiao was. Many people in the pugilistic world cared about fame and fortune. Fame and fortune were ranked before the word fortune. Therefore, 99% of the people in the pugilistic world wanted fame. Whether it was a good reputation or a powerful reputation, they absolutely did not want a bad reputation. Even if some of the big sects in the pugilistic world wanted to kill and exterminate a sect, they would also want a good reason. Although it seemed hypocritical, this was the rule of the pugilistic world. And this Chu Xiao in front of him? He was clearly the kind of person who did not care about these false reputations. Teacherson cared about his reputation, so it was impossible for him to drive everyone away and monopolize the treasures, even though he had the same thoughts in his heart. However, Chu Xiao could do it. Chu Xiao was someone who dared to do anything. Therefore, this kind of person was the most terrifying. This was because this kind of person had no bottom line. When fighting with the other party, you would never know what methods he would use or what decisive actions he would take. At this moment, Chu Xiao did not know what Teacherson was thinking. He only said to Teacherson, "Elderson, those rats have been cleaned up. Can we make our move now?" Chapter 357. The Black Armor Warriors were notoriously difficult to deal with. Otherwise, the true martial sect would not have used them as a facade to guard the true martial hall. If the real martial arts sect was attacked one day, then the real martial arts sect wouldn't be far from being annihilated. Even 10,000 Black Armor Warriors would be useless. However, this could also indirectly prove the usefulness of this thing. Teacherson frowned and said, "How can we deal with this thing with just the two of us? Do you have an idea?" Chu Xiao gestured with a demonic dance in his hand and said, "No matter how strong the Black Armor Warrior is, it is just an inanimate object. What controls it is nothing more than the various arrays in its body." In the past, the sky-reaching martial sect had set up a Black Armor Warrior here to serve as a warning. If someone invaded and the Black Armor Warrior made a move, there would definitely be people coming. Therefore, they had set up a defensive area for the Black Armor Warrior. They would not let the Black Armor Warrior chase after one person and lead to the tiger being lured away from the mountain. What we need to do is very simple. Attack with full force and use inner strength to shake the array. Once the enemy catches up, They will immediately hide outside the attack range of the black armor warrior and wear it down. Oh right, Eldertson. You are from the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. You should have cultivated the Purple Lightning Azure Light Sword and the Divine Firmament Lightning Sword of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect, right? Using them to deal with the black armor warrior is very effective. Teachertson said in a low voice, I know the Purple Lightning Azure Light Sword. However, the Divine Firmament Lightning Sword needs to attract heaven and earth and attract lightning. It cannot be used in the sky-reaching pagoda. Chu Xiu shrugged and said, One is enough. With that, Chu Xiu slashed out with the demonic dance in his hand. The boundless demonic aura actually condensed into a 10-meter-long blade aura and slashed towards the black armor warrior. Seeing Chu Xiu's attack, Teachertson's eyebrows also twitched slightly. Chu Xiu's foundation was shockingly strong. A casual strike from him was a 10-meter-long blade aura. The accumulation of his inner strength was already similar to a unity of heaven and man realm warrior. In any case, when Teachertsen was at the 5 Chi's origin realm, his stellar energy definitely did not exceed 10 zhong. The saber fell, forcing the black-armored warrior to retreat several steps. Unexpectedly, it only left a white saber mark on the black-armored warrior's body. One could imagine how tough the black-armored warrior's body was. Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance was an existence that was infinitely close to a divine weapon, and its material was the foundation of a divine weapon. Even with the addition of the heavenly devil order, it still could not break through the black-armored warrior's defense. If it was any other 6th Revolution precious weapon, it would probably not even leave a mark on it. At this time, the black-armored warrior was also alarmed by Chu Xiu. His figure was like a black shadow as he swung the heavy sword in his hand at Chu Xiu. Actually, the black-armored warrior's attack method was very simple. He didn't know any sword techniques, just simple horizontal slashes. However, because its defensive power was astonishing and the power of that slash was also very heavy, even a martial art practitioner at the unity of heaven and man realm would not be able to block it so easily. Therefore, its power was abnormally strong. At this time, Teachertsen, who was at the side, also made his move. If they did not deal with the black-armored warrior, no one would be able to obtain the heart. Teachertsen was not so short-sighted as to play such tricks while they were working together. The long sword in Teachertsen's hand bloomed with layers of greenish-purple electric light. His figure was also extremely fast, like a bolt of lightning streaking across the sky, directly blasting the black-armored warrior's body. Immediately, the black-armored warrior's body trembled, and it turned around to attack. Teacher Xian. Chu Xiu took advantage of this opportunity to attack from behind. After the two sides exchanged a few moves, Chu Xiu and Teachertsen felt that they had consumed too much energy, so they immediately retreated. As expected, the black-armored warrior stopped attacking. After they recovered a portion of their vital energy, they continued to attack. After an hour, the array light on the black-armored warrior's body was completely extinguished, and it directly fell to the ground. Chu Xiu and Teachertsen were slightly out of breath. Even with their cultivation, the consumption of internal energy at this time was not an ordinary amount. Teachertsen looked at the black-armored warrior on the ground and shook his head with slight pity. Actually, this black-armored warrior itself is a treasure. It would be a pity to destroy it like this. Although the black-armored warrior looked somewhat useless, and if there was only one of it, its use would be limited. It could only be used to guard the door, but for a large sect, it was a good item to hold up the facade. If Teachertsen could bring it back to the Ba Mountain Sword Sect, he would definitely have made a great contribution. But now, this thing was completely destroyed. Although there did not seem to be many scars on the outside, the arrays and mechanisms inside had been destroyed. Today, when the Thousand Machines sect was destroyed, no one could restore it. Chu Xiu said indifferently, other than a martial arts grandmaster who can completely subdue it, no one can subdue this thing. Let's just look at what's in front of us. As he spoke, Chu Xiu and Teachertsen both looked at the heart of the beast sealed in ice. Their eyes revealed a burning look. Although they didn't know what the beast's heart was, no matter how weak the beast was, its entire body was still a treasure. For a moment, the two fell into a strange silence. At this time, Chu Xiu and Teachertsen raised the sword and saber in their hands at the same time and slashed at each other. Surging demonic energy and purple lightning intertwined, and violent explosions of energy bloomed. The heaven demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand slashed down continuously. The power of the Avicii demonic blade was displayed to the extreme. One blade had 3 transformations, and it slashed open the door to hell. Faint cries of ghosts and gods could be heard. Teacher Tsin's sword presence became extremely steady and heavy in that instant. As the sword aura slashed down, it evolved into the magnificent earth, mountains and rivers. Splendid mountain and river sword. The sword aura and the saber light collided. As the demonic energy surged, it could be said that they were evenly matched. No one could do anything to the other. Although Chu Xiu's explosive power was strong, Teacher Tsin was, after all, a great expert at the unity of heaven and man realm. His realm was higher than Chu Xiu's by several levels. In addition, although the martial arts of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect were not very famous, the Ba Mountain Sword Sect's 8-character sword tactics were both offensive and defensive. They could be arranged at will and had few weaknesses. As the sword moves changed back and forth, Chu Xiu could not do anything to Teacher Xian. Of course, Teacher Tsin also lacked killing moves. Facing a freak like Chu Xiu who could kill an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm with the 5 Qis unification, he was also very helpless. After the two exchanged dozens of lightning-fast moves, they could not help but put down the sword and saber in their hands at the same time and looked at each other warily. Both Chu Xiu and Teacher Tsin were not easy to deal with. One was a hungry wolf, the other a greedy old fox. With benefits in front of them, they could put down their hatred and work together. But now that the obstacle had been removed, both of them wanted to monopolize the beast's heart. Chu Xiu put away the sky demon dance in his hand and smiled. Elder Tsen is indeed an expert of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Your 8-character sword tactics have been cultivated to perfection. The corners of Teacher Tsen's mouth also pulled into a forced smile. Official Chu's strength as the 6th on the Longhu roll is not just for show. Since neither of them could do anything to the other, they could only split the heart according to the agreement they had previously made. Actually, whether it was Chu Xiu or Teacher Tsin, they did not necessarily feel that they could not win against each other. If they really fought to the death, in Chu Xiu's view, it was not as if he had never killed a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm. Although Teacher Tsin's strength was above the Wei family patriarch and the others, he was not as strong as Feng Wuling. And in Teacher Tsin's view, he also had trump cards that he had not used. If they really fought to the death, would they not be able to do anything to a junior warrior like Chu Xiu? But in this situation, there was no need for them to fight to the death. The Tower of Babel was so big, and this was just a corner of it. Who knew what good things were inside? It was not worth it to fight to the death now. After splitting up half of the heart, Chu Xiu threw it into the secret space box, turned around and left without looking back. Teacher Tsin did the same. Both of them had ulterior motives. When they worked together, it could be said that they schemed at every turn. It was definitely not a happy cooperation. After leaving the main hall, Chu Xiu took out the array disc. There were many dots of light flashing in one direction. Clearly, there were many people near that side, and one of the scarlet dots of light was Lu Fengxian. Previously, Chu Xiu did not ask what cultivation technique Lu Fengxian cultivated. Now, his inner strength was scarlet in color. He did not know what kind of fortuitous encounter he had in the land of West Chu, but he was not weak. With a move of his body, Chu Xiu headed in the direction where Lu Fengxian and the others were. In this Tower of Babel, there were only 2 people that Chu Xiu was afraid of. One was Xiahou Wujiang's 7th uncle, and the other was Teacher Xian. Just now, if Lu Fengxian had been there, Chu Xiu would have dared to join forces with Lu Fengxian to kill Teacher Xian. Then, he and Lu Fengxian would split the beast's heart equally. At this time, Lu Fengxian and the others were not at peace. There were many people with Lu Fengxian. There was Mo Tianlin, several loose cultivators, Xiahou Wujiang, Yan Fian, and 2 female disciples of the Yu Palace. Not only were they surrounded by a group of exotic beasts, but they were also trapped by an array that had suddenly been activated. Those exotic beasts weren't a threat to them, and their strengths were extremely weak. However, the formation around them was constantly weakening their inner strength and true qi, causing their true qi consumption to be 10 times or even more than 10 times that of the past every time they attacked. This also caused them to not dare to go all out to kill those exotic beasts. If they didn't manage to charge out of the formation's range halfway, their inner strength would be overly exhausted, and they would be swallowed whole by these beasts without leaving even dregs. Now that they were surrounded, Mo Tianlin smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Lu, we're really too unlucky this time. We didn't get any benefits, but we encountered such a thing. It's a pity that Brother Chu isn't here. If he was, you could join forces with him, and we would definitely be able to kill our way out. Lu Fengxian waved halberd to kill those exotic beasts while saying in a low voice, "There are all these messy things everywhere. I reckon that Brother Chu is also entangled by these things. We'll first think of a way to kill our way out, and then go save Brother Chu." When Mo Tianlin heard this, he could not help but be speechless. This brother was really ambitious. He had not even resolved his own crisis, and he was already thinking of saving others. Chapter 358. The situation of Lu Fengxian and the others was indeed not good. Of course, the most important thing was that they were not of the same mind. Apart from those itinerant martial artists, Lu Fengxian, Xiahou Wujiang, and Yan Fian all had the strength to be in the top 10 of the Longhu list. Mo Tianlin was also an expert on the Longhu list. If these people really joined forces, they would not lose to a unity of heaven and man realm martial artist. It would be very easy to kill their way out. But among these people, Lu Fengxian and Mo Tianlin were on Chu Xiu's side, and they had enmity with the Yunu Palace and the Xiahou clan. And the Yunu Palace that Yan Fian came from also had enmity with the Xiahou clan because of the previous incident with Feng Wuling. Previously, the people of the Yunu Palace suffered at the hands of the Xiahou clan. Although the matter was considered to be settled due to the powerful strength of the Xiahou clan, the people of the Yunu Palace still had some enmity with Xiahou Wujiang. When Yan Fian and the others went up the mountain, they did not say a word to Xiahou Wujiang. And previously, the people of the Yunu Palace also had a conflict with Chu Xiu, sowing another enmity. Looking at Xiahou Wujiang's side, it was the same. He also had enmity with both sides, so in this way, the conflict between the three sides was not just a little deep. It was almost impossible for them to unite without any ill feelings. At this time, Xiahou Wujiang's eyes showed a touch of ruthlessness. Among these people, Xiahou Wujiang was the one who consumed the most energy. Although the spirit control technique of the Xiahou clan was powerful, it also consumed a lot of energy. These exotic beasts did not have much mental strength, and they could easily be blown up by Xiahou Wujiang's spirit control technique. But the problem was that his spirit control technique could not be used like this. In the face of these endless exotic beasts, Xiahou Wujiang's mental strength was consumed like water. If this continued, he was afraid that there would not be much left, so he had to think of a way to kill his way out in advance. Xiahou Wujiang turned around and shouted at the few itinerant martial artists, "You guys go up and hold them off. Once we kill our way out, everyone will be rewarded." The rogue martial artists immediately shook their heads and hurriedly retreated. For these people, although Xiahou Wujiang's reward was important, and being able to make friends with a young elite like Xiahou Wujiang was also not bad, their lives were more important at the moment. Who would dare to go forward and throw away their lives? At that time, he would not be able to spend the money even if he had his life. Xiahou Wujiang's eyes flashed with killing intent when he saw that none of them had come up. Xiahou Wujiang formed a seal with his hand, and a mysterious power burst out. The imperial spirit art was directly displayed by him to the extreme. However, Xiahou Wujiang's imperial spirit technique wasn't aimed at those exotic beasts, but at those independent martial artists. The strongest of these rogue martial artists was only at the physical invulnerability realm, and they couldn't resist Xiahou Wujiang's imperial spirit technique at all. Their minds were directly controlled by him, and they foolishly burst out their own gang qi to rush forward. However, the person at the front could only resist for a few breaths before his gang qi was exhausted, and then he was torn into a bloody mist by a group of exotic beasts. Xiahou Wujiang didn't care about this at this time. He directly took out a formation plate from the secret space box. There were 4 small swords inserted on the formation plate, which turned out to be a miniature sword formation. This was a gift from Xiahou Wujiang's father on his 18th birthday. It was the famous and powerful sword formation of Hidden Sword Villa, a miniature simplified version of the 4 absolute sword formation. It could only be used once, and the formation plate would shatter after it was used. It was a life-saving item given to him by his father, and now Xiahou Wujiang had no choice but to take it out. As the sword formation was activated, the 4 small swords protected Xiahou Wujiang's body, and the few martial artists controlled by Xiahou Wujiang's imperial spirit technique opened a path in front, blocking 90% of the exotic beasts. Any fish that slipped through the net would be strangled by the sword formation. After using his own territory, Xiahou Wujiang actually smoothly disappeared into the formation. Seeing this scene, the two female disciples of the Yu Palace cursed angrily, "Shameless!" Xiahou Wujiang's actions were indeed very shameless. Although the people of the Yu Palace were overbearing and unreasonable, they still considered themselves to be from a righteous sect. Now that Xiahou Wujiang was doing this, it was undoubtedly very shameless in their eyes. Yan Fian wasn't as angry as the two female disciples. She just frowned and secretly thought that it wasn't good. Xiahou Wujiang left, but as soon as he escaped, the exotic beasts attacked even more fiercely, causing their qi to be greatly consumed. The Yu Palace's Yu sword mantra was naturally formed. Although it was powerful because every move involved a huge amount of heaven and earth power, the qi needed to be used was also extremely shocking. In a one-on-one fight, the Yu Palace's martial artist's explosive power was extremely shocking. However, in this situation, even if Yan Fian's strength was outstanding, there was nothing she could do. What happened next was indeed as Yan Fian had expected. After those exotic beasts lost the resistance of Xiahou Wujiang and the others, they became even more berserk, causing Yan Fian and the others to be somewhat unable to hold on anymore. At this time, Lu Fengxian glanced at Yan Fian and the others. He suddenly bit his finger, and fresh blood seeped into the silver halberd in his hand, causing the entire halberd to turn scarlet red. At the same time, Lu Fengxian formed a seal with one hand, and strands of blood-red runes appeared on his face. However, when matched with his handsome appearance, it gave off an evil sense of beauty. In that instant, the aura around Lu Fengxian's body rose to the extreme. As the halberd swept across, a scarlet-red aura instantly swept out, like a storm. Everywhere it passed, all the exotic beasts were torn into a cloud of blood mist by this halberd, and a large area was instantly emptied out. Mo Tianlin was stunned. This was the first time he had seen Lu Fengxian use his full strength. He didn't expect the power to be so terrifying. Lu Fengxian turned around and shouted at Yan Fian, "Follow behind me, we'll kill our way out." Yan Fian was stunned. She didn't seem to expect that Lu Fengxian, who was Chu Xiu's good friend, would actually be willing to save her along the way. However, at this time, Lu Fengxian seemed to have already turned around and killed a bloody path forward. Yan Fian thought about it, but still called out to her two junior sisters, and followed behind Lu Fengxian, killing their way forward together. Finally, after an unknown amount of time, without the suppression of the formation, everyone immediately felt their bodies lighten, and those exotic beasts also seemed to sense something, and retreated like the tide. At this time, Lu Fengxian's face was slightly pale, and the strange runes on his face had also disappeared. He stood on the spot, panting uncontrollably. Yan Fian looked at Lu Fengxian and hesitated for a moment, but still walked over and cupped his hands in salute, saying, "Thank you, young Master Lu, for saving us. I will remember this favor." Previously, Yan Fian didn't pay much attention to Lu Fengxian. After all, Lu Fengxian's reputation in the pugilistic world wasn't that great. She didn't expect that she would be mistaken. This Lu Fengxian's strength was actually so shocking. He was definitely comparable to Chu Xiu and Xiahou Wujiang, those young elites who were in the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger leaderboard. Lu Fengxian waved his hand and said, "I just did it in passing. If Miss Yan wants to thank me, then put aside the enmity between the Yu Palace and Brother Chu for now. We have already explained the matter regarding Feng Wuling very clearly. Brother Chu did it unintentionally. And Brother Chu is now a torturer of the Guanzhong torture room. If the Yu Palace insists on becoming enemies with Brother Chu, other than gaining an enemy out of thin air, there won't be any other benefits. Miss Yan, please think carefully before you act." Yan Fian looked at Lu Fengxian in surprise. She also didn't expect Lu Fengxian to actually say such a thing. After a moment of silence, Yan Fian nodded and said, "Since young Master Lu has said so, then the matter between the Yu Palace and Chu Xiu will be over. As long as Chu Xiu doesn't provoke the Yu Palace, the Yu Palace will also not provoke Chu Xiu." Yan Fian agreed very quickly. In fact, from the beginning, Yan Fian didn't want to become enemies with Chu Xiu. When Wan Er went to question Chu Xiu on Mount Deyang and asked for an explanation and so on, it was just a matter of face. The people from the Yu Palace went to the Xiahou clan to ask for an explanation, but in the end, they were deceived by the people from the Xiahou clan. Not only did they not get anything, but they also lost face. After seeing Chu Xiao, the other people from the Yunnu Palace might not be able to provoke the Yunnu Palace because they were used to bossing people around in the past. Perhaps they couldn't provoke the Xiahou clan, but could the Guanzhong torture room's Chu Xiao not be able to provoke them? Therefore, the previous scene happened. Yan Fian thought that Chu Xiao would definitely give face to the Yunnu Palace, so she didn't stop Wan'er. Just like what Mo Tianlin said, if Chu Xiao had been replaced with Lu Fengxian or him, they would have patiently explained to the people from the Yunnu Palace and given them enough face. Then they would definitely not have fought. But who would have thought that with a beauty in front of them, Chu Xiao's attitude was so unyielding, and the Yunnu Palace couldn't back down either. Thus, the enmity between the two sides was formed. But now that Lu Fengxian had saved the people from the Yunnu Palace, Yan Fian had to return this favor no matter what. It just so happened that she had a way out of this embarrassing situation. After all, after witnessing Chu Xiao's strength, Yan Fian also somewhat regretted not stopping Wan'er. Becoming enemies with such an opponent was not a good thing. After Yan Fian pulled her two junior sisters who were still somewhat unwilling away and left, Mo Tianlin asked doubtfully, "Brother Lu, you saved them just now to help Brother Chu resolve the enmity between him and the Yunnu Palace?" Lu Fengxian smiled, nodded, and said, "That's right. Brother Chu's enmity with the Yunnu Palace is nothing more than a fight for face. It's not like the enmity with Xiahou Wujiang, where it's an irreconcilable enmity. Brother Chu has already offended enough people in the Jianghu. Although he doesn't mind having one more, it's undoubtedly better to have fewer. It just so happens that I have such an opportunity to help him resolve this not too serious enmity. This will also allow Brother Chu to relax a little in the Jianghu." After hearing Lu Fengxian's words, Mo Tianlin sighed. He finally understood why the cold and indifferent Xie Xiaolu held Lu Fengxian in such high esteem that he was even willing to give up his position as the successor of the World Alliance to Lu Fengxian. And the overbearing Chu Xiao was also a close friend of Lu Fengxian. Chu Xiao talked about benefits to others, but only talked about friendship with Lu Fengxian. Becoming friends with a person like Lu Fengxian, he would never let you suffer a loss. And no one could refuse to become friends with a person who would always think for you. Perhaps this was Lu Fengxian's charisma, an existence even more dazzling than his martial arts. Chapter 359. When Chu Xiao found Lu Fengxian and Mo Tianlin, the two of them had almost recovered their strength. However, because Lu Fengxian had used a secret technique to rush out of the formation, her vitality was somewhat injured, so she only recovered some of her qi temporarily. Her body still needed to be recuperated after going out to recover to its peak. Seeing Chu Xiao coming, Mo Tianlin said in surprise, "Brother Chu, didn't you encounter those strange beasts?" Chu Xiao nodded and said, "I encountered them, but they were all dealt with, and I also got a little harvest." As Chu Xiao said this, he took out the half of the vicious beast's heart and showed it to them. He also told them about what he had encountered after entering Sky Split Tower. In any case, they were all on the same side. Besides the matter of the array disc, Chu Xiao didn't hide anything else. After listening, Mo Tianlin was speechless. The gap between people was really big. After entering here, they triggered the formation and were chased by the strange beasts, making them very embarrassed. In the end, Chu Xiao actually had a lot of harvest. Mo Tianlin also told Chu Xiao about what he encountered after entering here, especially the matter of Lu Fengxian helping Chu Xiao settle the grudge with the Yunnu Palace. After listening, Chu Xiao said to Lu Fengxian in a deep voice, "Brother Lu, thank you." He and Lu Fengxian had fought side by side. There was no need for those hypocritical promises and gratitude. 2 words were enough to express everything. Chu Xiao was indeed right. Becoming friends with a person like Lu Fengxian, he would never let you suffer. Although Chu Xiao didn't put the Yunnu Palace in his eyes, just like what Lu Fengxian said, Chu Xiao didn't mind having one more enemy, but having one less was naturally better. Mo Tianlin chuckled at the side and said, "It's said that the women of the Yunnu Palace are somewhat unreasonable. The other disciples are indeed like that. However, that Yan Fian is worthy of being the only person that the Yunnu Palace can bring out. She still knows what's good for her." Once Brother Lu said it, she immediately agreed. Chu Xiao smiled meaningfully and said, "Brother Mo, don't underestimate that woman. That Yan Fian is definitely not someone easy to deal with. It's not that she's easy to talk to, but she knows the gains and losses of Hung Liang. If I hadn't shown enough strength, and Brother Liu had also shown enough strength, do you think she would have relented so easily? Face is not given by others, but earned by oneself. Mo Tianlin shook his head and said, "It's complicated dealing with people like you." After chatting for a while, Chu Xiu asked, "Oh right, where's Brother Xie? You didn't see him?" Mo Tianlin shook his head and said, "We didn't see him after we came in, but don't worry. That guy's strength is stronger than mine, and he also has the life-saving item that Alliance leader Chen gave him. Nothing will happen easily." Chu Xiu nodded and pointed to the back of the formation. "Have you seen what's behind this?" Mo Tianlin and Lu Fengxian were stunned and said, "Behind? What's behind this?" Chu Xiu said, "Don't forget, this is the Tongtian Tower, the place where the disciples of the ancient Tongtian martial sect lived and cultivated. If it wasn't an important place, would the people of the Tongtian martial sect set up a formation here for no reason?" Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Mo Tianlin and Lu Fengxian came to their senses. Only some extremely important places would be guarded by things like array formations and traps. They had just been teleported here and had almost forgotten about this point. The formation in front of them was invisible and intangible. Chu Xiu and the other two did not know how big it was, so they could only start to search around the formation. After bypassing the spirit array, a small white jade door appeared in front of the three of them. Chu Xiu blasted out a palm force and carefully blasted the stone door open, but there was no danger inside. When Chu Xiu and the others entered, they found that it seemed to be a person's residence. There were some messy things everywhere. Chu Xiu and the others checked carefully. Apart from some miscellaneous things, most of them were some ancient books. However, they were not about martial arts but about divination, formation Tao, and even some things that Chu Xiu and the others did not understand at all. Mo Tianlin shook his head and said, "This should be the residence of a master of the Tongtian martial sect who was proficient in formation Tao or divination. I'm afraid there are no martial arts secret manuals here." None of the people present had any use for formation Tao or divination. The Heaven Alliance and the Guanzhong torture room did not have anyone who was proficient in divination and formation Tao. Therefore, these things were given to Mo Tianlin for him to bring back to the Mo family. As a large family in the past, the Mo family had a few formation masters who could use these things. When the three of them entered the deepest part of the residence, the scene in front of them made everyone slightly stunned. There was a disc-shaped altar in the deepest part of the place, and a stooped figure was sitting in the middle. Taking a closer look, the stooped figure had already turned into a skeleton. In front of him was a white jade tablet. His finger was still on it, and he used blood to write a line of words. However, the words had already turned pitch black at this time. The three of them looked at each other. The divination master of the Tongtian martial sect actually died here. Did he use his life to divine? There were not many people in Jianghu who were proficient in divination, but definitely not few. However, there were not many who could be called masters. The reason was very simple. Those who were proficient in divination rarely lived long. Some of their lifespans were even shorter than that of ordinary people. The first reason was that divination consumed too much spirit and blood essence. It was not easy to make up for this. The second reason was a little mysterious. Legend had it that divination revealed the secrets of heaven. Naturally, heaven would be jealous. Therefore, all those who practiced divination would have their lifespans shortened or die a violent death. Therefore, some of the people who could be called divination masters in Jianghu were at the level of martial arts masters. Moreover, they would not easily perform divination. Once they performed divination, they would pay the price of their own lifespans. They went around the back of the skeleton and looked at the words on the white jade tablet. The words were crooked, giving people a very strange feeling. It was as if they were barely written with the last bit of strength. There were only 8 words. Heavens will not be defeated, Devil Lord will not die. Everyone present looked at each other. What did this mean? The divination written by the people of the Tongtian martial sect to the Devil sect master, Dugu Weiwei? Now, when the Devil Lord was mentioned, everyone would immediately think of the Devil sect master, Dugu Weiwei. Moreover, Dugu Weiwei had not been defeated even once. Even if he disappeared after the battle with Ning Xuanji, it did not prove that Dugu Weiwei had been defeated. But soon, everyone came to their senses. Something didn't seem right. The Clear Sky Martial Sect was a sect from the ancient era. After the great calamity of the ancient era, the Clear Sky Martial Sect had been completely annihilated. Dugu Weiwa was the cult leader of the Devil Sect 10,000 years later. How could the divination grandmaster of the Clear Sky Martial Sect predict the future of a person 10,000 years later? Mo Tianlin hesitated and said, "If the Tao of divination is cultivated to the peak, can it really predict what will happen 10,000 years later?" Lu Fengxian, who was at the side, said, "The Tao of divination is to predict the future. Some people have already deduced some clues about the great calamity of the ancient times. Otherwise, the ancient sects would not have created secret boxes to store cultivation techniques and other things. However, no one knows if the time of this deduction can reach 10,000 years. The problem is, why would this divination master use his life to predict a person 10,000 years later? At this time, the Tongtian martial sect has already been destroyed. This is completely meaningless. Could this divination grandmaster be predicting the devil cult of the ancient times? The three branches of Tao, Buddhism, and devil have been passed down since ancient times. What if he deduces the devil lord of the ancient times?" Mo Tianlin shook his head and said, "Although many ancient books have been found, there are even more missing. There are really no records of the devil sect among them. However, in the current history, the devil sect has been in a state of disunity since the great calamity of the ancient times. There are all kinds of devil Tao sects, but no one has become the real ruler. It was not until Dugu Weiwei took control of the Kunlun devil cult more than 1,000 years ago that all the devils in the world bowed their heads and became famous in the world. It was also then that the title of Devil Lord came into being. Legend has it that the peak of the Kunlun devil cult is still burning with the rootless sacred fire. The three devil weapons of the Kunlun devil cult were forged from the rootless sacred fire. After the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult, some of the remnants of the devil cult also shouted the slogan that the devil lord would not die as long as the sacred fire was not extinguished. It is somewhat similar to the divination master's deduction of the undefeatable destiny and the devil lord. TSK, the undefeatable destiny. This destiny is top-notch and domineering. I reckon that since the ancient times, apart from Dugu Weiwei, no one else in this world can shoulder this destiny." Mo Tianlin exclaimed in admiration. He didn't think much of it. They were all juniors in the Jianghu. The Kunlun devil cult had long been destroyed, so the devil lord's death had nothing to do with them. However, they felt that it was a pity that there was nothing good in this place. However, at this time, Mo Tianlin felt that something was wrong. It was not that there was something wrong with the place, but that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu. From the moment he saw those words, Chu Xiu stared at them without saying a word, as if he was in a daze. Mo Tianlin nudged Chu Xiu and said in surprise, "Brother Chu, what did you find?" After being nudged by Mo Tianlin, Chu Xiu seemed to wake up. He shook his head slightly and said, "No, I just wanted to see if there was anything unusual about this handwriting." Chu Xiu lied. In fact, he was suddenly in a daze because the moment he looked at those words, his consciousness seemed to be pulled into those words and he could not extricate himself. Chu Xiu seemed to have seen something, but at the same time, he did not see anything. Anyway, it was an extremely uncomfortable feeling. It was not until Mo Tianlin nudged him that Chu Xiu was freed from that state. Chapter 360. Chu Xiu was somewhat puzzled as to why he would fall into those words. The other two were normal, but why was he the only one who was like this? Could it be related to this body of his? After all, in the original plot, this body of his had become the cult master, so he was worthy of the title. However, even in the original storyline, there was still a huge gap between him, the demon lord, and Dugu Weiwa, who had nearly unified the pugilistic world with his demonic might. It could even be described as the difference between heaven and earth. Furthermore, it was almost impossible for a life providence like the invincible destiny to exist. Since ancient times, apart from Dugu Weiwei, Chu Xiu couldn't think of anyone else who could bear such a life providence. Everyone didn't discover anything and prepared to leave. At that moment, Chu Xiu held the white jade slate and said, "I'll keep this. It might be of some use in the future." After all, it was left behind by a divination master. The others didn't have any objections. This was an ordinary white jade slate. It was made of the same material as the Tower of Babel. If Chu Xiao wanted to collect it, they naturally wouldn't snatch it from Chu Xiao. After going back and forth, Mo Tianlin looked at the fog and said worriedly, "The fog here is so thick. I can't see the direction at all. Getting lost is secondary. What if I step on a trap again?" Chu Xiao smiled and pointed in a seemingly random direction. "Follow me. It's definitely right." Mo Tianlin was puzzled. "Why?" Chu Xiao pointed at his head and said, "Intuition. It said that women have intuition. Brother Chu, do you have it too?" Mo Tianlin lampooned, but he still followed the direction Chu Xiao pointed. Anyway, they were confused now, so they could just randomly choose a direction to walk in. Chu Xiao didn't know the details of the original plot, but he could use the dumbest method to figure it out. For a circular building like the Tower of Babel, the most important place was definitely in the center. Others couldn't find the direction of the center, but Chu Xiao had hidden the 5-element array around it, so he could easily find it. Now, he had already met up with Lu Fengxian. With the two of them working together, even if they encountered 7th Uncle Chu Xiao, they would still dare to fight. Everyone walked forward for about 15 minutes. The fog became thinner the further they went. Finally, there was a round tower standing in it. The round tower looked like a smaller Tower of Babel, but above the door, there were the words, Arsenal. Mo Tianlin looked at Chu Xiao and muttered, "Brother Chu, your intuition is really accurate, even more accurate than a woman's." Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, "Are you praising me or scolding me?" As soon as Chu Xiao finished speaking, the door was blasted open, and a figure rushed out. It was Tang Ya. At this moment, behind Tang Ya, 3 invisible arrows of astral energy shot towards him in rapid succession. The 2 daggers in Tang Ya's hands burst forth with violent stellar energy to block the first arrow. But when he wanted to block the second arrow, his daggers shattered with a loud bang, and Tang Ya spat out a mouthful of blood. Just as he was about to use his secret art to block the third arrow, a pitch-black saber light slashed across, and with a loud bang, it directly chopped down the gang energy arrow. Chu Xiao walked over and said with a frown, "What's going on? Is there someone inside?" Seeing that the person who came was Chu Xiao, Tang Ya breathed a sigh of relief and said, "The people of the Xiahou clan and Teachertsen are inside, as well as many others from the Yu Palace. The people of the Xiahou clan want to monopolize the things in this arsenal. They actually suppressed Teachertsen by themselves and killed a lot of people. Yan Buhui is inside, but I don't think he can block more than a few arrows from the Xiahou clan's warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm." Tang Ya was not Lu Fengxian. Outside, Lu Fengxian could take the 7th Uncle's 13 soul-stealing arrows head-on, but if it was a warrior at the 3-flower realm like Tang Ya, the 7th Uncle's 13 soul-stealing arrows would probably be able to kill them in one shot. However, the 7th Uncle's 13 soul-stealing arrows only had 13 arrows. Previously, he had already wasted 1 arrow outside. Naturally, he did not need to waste arrows against small fries like Tang Ya. Even so, it was very difficult for Tang Ya to block the arrows. If it were not for Chu Xiao's timely intervention, Tang Ya would probably be seriously injured even if he did not die. Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, "The good things are all inside. We can't let the people of the Xiahou clan monopolize them. Everyone, go in and attack together." As he spoke, Chu Xiao and the others also rushed into the arsenal. The area of the arsenal in the sky-reaching tower was not small. It was about 1,000 feet in radius. The surrounding tower was bare, but there was a huge green tongue tree in the center. Secret boxes of different sizes were placed on each branch. Obviously, even an idiot would know that the better the things were, the more likely they would be on top. However, at this time, other than the branches of the green tongue tree that were closest to the bottom, the secret boxes above were still there. It was not that they did not want to take them, but that the bottom was already in a mess. They were all here for the treasures, and it was impossible to distinguish between friend and foe. Among them, 7th Uncle was fighting with Teacher Cen. He still had 9 of his 13 soul-stealing arrows left, and the long sword in Teachertsen's hand had cracks. Obviously, it had been heavily injured by 7th Uncle. At this time, 7th Uncle also did not continue using the 13 soul-stealing arrows. Instead, he only used the arrows condensed from his stellar energy to fight with Teacher Cen. But even so, Teachertsen was still being suppressed. 7th Uncle was clearly preparing to exhaust his opponent to death. Below, Xiahou Wujiang was fighting with Yan Fian. Actually, in terms of strength, Yan Fian should be stronger than Xiahou Wujiang. Yan Fian had stepped into the Five Qis origin realm much earlier than Xiahou Wujiang. Moreover, the Yu Maiden Palace's Yu Maiden Sword mantra was extremely powerful in a one-on-one fight. Xiahou Wujiang definitely did not dare to face it head-on. But now, Xiahou Wujiang was using the Imperial Spirit technique to deal with Yan Fian. He did not directly use the Imperial Spirit technique on Yan Fian. Instead, he forcibly used his mental strength to control two female disciples of the Yu Maiden Palace as meat shields. While this kind of fighting method was somewhat shameless, it also made Yan Fian cautious and not dare to use his full strength. Therefore, he was instead suppressed by Xiahou Wujiang. The other Ba Mountain Sword sect disciples, some unaffiliated martial artists, and Chu Xiu subordinates were fighting chaotically with each other, wanting to obtain the secret treasure box on the green tongue tree. But the result was that no one obtained anything. As long as someone approached the green tongue tree, Seventh Uncle would shoot down an arrow. Just like Tanya just now, he was almost seriously injured. And now, seeing Chu Xiu and the others enter, the others present also secretly thought, not good. The scene before them was already chaotic enough. If Chu Xiu and the others also intervened, it would be even more chaotic. Chu Xiu gave Lu Fengxian a look, and the two immediately headed for the green tongue tree in the center. But at this time, seeing Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian's movements, Teacher Tsen and Seventh Uncle simultaneously stopped. A sword energy and an invisible arrow shot towards Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian, blocking in front of them. Although Seventh Uncle and Teacher Tsen were fighting so fiercely just now, they could not let Chu Xiu reap the benefits. Looking at the two people blocking in front of him, Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "One monk carries water to eat, 2 monks carry water to eat, 3 monks have no water to eat." While this analogy is somewhat inappropriate, if the 3 of us continue to persist like this, none of us will obtain any benefits. No one knows how long the sky-reaching tower will be open for, and we also do not know how many people will come from outside in this period of time. Why don't the 3 of us split the treasures? Teacher Tsen was somewhat tempted. He said in a deep voice, "How do we split it? The treasures are all stored in the secret boxes. Do we have to open the boxes one by one to check?" Furthermore, the most valuable items in the sky-reaching tower are definitely at the top. Who should we give them to? These items should all be listed in a list. This trip to the sky-reaching tower was a pleasant surprise for Teacher Cn. As for the enmity between him and Chu Xiu, after witnessing Chu Xiu's strength, he was prepared to let it go. If Chu Xiu was not strong enough and did not have the backing of the Guanzhong torture room, Teacher Tsen did not mind killing him to avenge his disciple. But now, not to mention the fact that he could not kill Chu Xiu, forcefully killing him would bring about endless troubles in the future. It was not worth it. Just as Chu Xiu had said, Teacher Tsen had many disciples. It was not worth it to sacrifice himself for one disciple. So, according to what Chu Xiu said, the 3 of them would split the treasures equally. As long as he did not lose out, Teacher Tsen was willing. At this time, when the group of wandering martial artists heard Chu Xiu's words, they were extremely anxious. If they were to engage in a chaotic battle right now, these wandering martial artists would have a chance to take advantage of the chaos to obtain some benefits. But if they waited until the 3 sides reached an agreement to split the treasures equally, they would not even be able to get the leftovers. But at this time, Xiahou Wujiang broke away from the battle with the Yu New Palace martial artists and said coldly, "Elder Tsen, do you not want to avenge your disciple? The Ba Mountain Sword sect is one of the 7 sects and 8 schools, and is an illustrious existence in West Chu. You, Teacher Tsen, can be considered a character in the West Chu martial arts world. If that disciple of yours knew that not only did his master not take revenge for him, he even cooperated with his enemy, I'm afraid he wouldn't be willing in the underworld." Teacher Tsen's face twitched. Although what Xiahou Wujiang had said was the truth, and what he had said was to provoke Teacher Tsen into attacking Chu Xiu, saying it in front of so many people still made Teacher Tsen lose face. Especially if today's matter was spread by the wandering martial artists present, Teacher Tsen was sure that the next day, there would be rumors in the martial world that he, Teacher Tsen, was afraid of Chu Xiu. His disciple had been killed by Chu Xiu, but in the end, he did not even dare to fart in front of Chu Xiu, and even wanted to cooperate with him. The people in the martial world who spread rumors were always 30% true and 70% false. Only the heavens knew how his matter would be spread. Chapter 361. Xiahou Wujiang's provocation caused Teacher Tsin, who had been tempted, to hesitate again. Chu Xiu looked coldly at Xiahou Wujiang, a cold light and murderous intent in his eyes. Compared to the time at the God Weapon Conference, the present Xiahou Wujiang had grown a lot. At least, he was much more brilliant than when he had incited that mob to kill him. At that time, Xiahou Wujiang was just a clown with a good background and talent, a hedonistic son of a rich family. He would not amount to anything. Just from the fact that he had offended Mo Tianlin, a descendant of one of the 9 great clans, for a woman, it could be seen that his actions were arrogant and childish. But now, Xiahou Wujiang was enough to become Chu Xiu's enemy, and he had to take him seriously. Chu Xiu looked at Teacher Tsin in front of him and said coolly, "Elder Tsin, there is only one chance to enter the Tower of Babel. Do you want to return empty-handed? According to what I know, although you are an elder of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect, the qualifications of an elder of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect are very lax. As long as you have reached the unity of heaven and are over 50 years of age, you can be granted the qualifications of an elder. So this treatment is different from the elders of other sections. Obtaining the opportunity of the Tower of Babel this time will at least be comparable to the resources that the sect has given you for many years." Chu Xiu's words moved Teacher Xian. Although his title as an elder of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect was quite grand, in reality, it was not that valuable. The elders of other sects were the kind of senior martial artists of virtue and prestige, the mainstay of the sect. But the Ba Mountain Sword Sect did not have so many requirements. As long as one's strength and age were sufficient, they could be made an elder, and the treatment was not very high. So Teacher Tsin placed great importance on the opportunity of the Tower of Babel this time. Did he want fame or profit? Teacher Tsin was very conflicted. But at this time, Xiahou Wujiang suddenly said loudly, "Elder Tsin, the Xiahou family does not want the things in the Tower of Babel this time. They all belong to you. As long as you can join hands with my 7th uncle to kill Chu Xiu, my Xiahou family will immediately let go of the Sky Split Tower contest." As soon as these words came out, everyone present was stunned. No one thought that Xiahou Wujiang's killing intent towards Chu Xiu was so great that he actually gave up the treasures in the sky-reaching tower for it. In fact, although Xiahou Wujiang wanted the treasures in the sky-reaching tower, he didn't value them as much as Teacher Tsin did. He was the most outstanding disciple of the Xiahou clan's younger generation, and his father was the Xiahou clan patriarch. Most of the Xiahou clan's resources were inclined toward him. Although the Xiahou clan wouldn't give all of its resources to Xiahou Wujiang alone, Xiahou Wujiang alone could occupy more than half of the clan's younger generation. Moreover, the uniqueness of the Xiahou clan's spirit control technique also prevented 90% of the Xiahou clan's disciples from being distracted to cultivate other techniques. So even if Xiahou Wujiang obtained the techniques in the sky-reaching tower, he wouldn't necessarily cultivate them. Instead, he would hand them over to the clan in exchange for other rewards. Using these things that he could give up at any time to exchange for Chu Xiu's life, in Xiahou Wujiang's opinion, this transaction was very worth it. Hearing Xiahou Wujiang's words, the balance in Teacher Tsin's heart immediately began to tilt. With a long sword in hand, he stood together with his 7th uncle. Killing Chu Xiu and taking revenge was secondary. The most important thing was that the Xiahou clan didn't want the treasures in the sky-reaching tower, and Chu Xiu had been killed by them together. The Yu Nu Palace didn't have an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm, and those unaffiliated martial artists were nothing to worry about. In this way, wouldn't all the treasures in the sky-reaching tower belong to him? Was there even a need to choose such a simple question? A cold glint flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. He looked at Teacher Tsin and said indifferently, "Elder Tsin, the enmity between us has already been put down, but now you're picking it up again. In a while, you'll realize that this was a very wrong decision." Teacher Tsin said indifferently, "Chu Xiu, you killed my disciple. How can I let go of such a huge enmity so easily? The grudges of the martial world should be settled in the martial world. If you don't die today, the enmity between us will be considered settled." The corners of Chu Xiu's mouth curled into a sinister smile. "If I don't die today, the one who will die will be you." For some reason, when Teacher Tsin heard the killing intent in Chu Xiu's tone, he felt a chill in his heart. However, he then sneered, "Arrogant. He could be considered a veteran of the martial world. How could he be frightened by a junior like Chu Xiu today? What a joke." 7th uncle, who was at the side, took out an arrow and knocked it on his giant bow. He said coldly, "Enough, don't talk nonsense with them. Quickly finish them off." As soon as he finished speaking, Seventh Uncle's arrow had already left the bow. Its speed was extremely fast, like a bolt of lightning. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived in front of Chu Xiao. The speed of the arrow was so fast that even if Chu Xiao erupted with the power of the internal binding seal, he still wouldn't be able to dodge it. Most importantly, it was useless for him to dodge it. The moment Seventh Uncle's soul-stealing arrow left the bow, Chu Xiao felt as if his soul had been locked onto. No matter where he fled to, the arrow would relentlessly pursue Chu Xiao. Therefore, Chu Xiao could only resist it head-on. The demonic saber was unsheathed, and the eerie demonic energy and blood energy combined. A powerful force suddenly erupted. The Avicii demonic saber slashed 3 times in a row. The first slash had already collapsed when it came into contact with the earth energy on the arrow. Although the second slash had successfully torn apart the earth energy, the saber light had already shattered. It was not until the third slash that Chu Xiao's heavenly demon dance collided with Seventh Uncle's arrow. Suddenly, an earth-shattering explosion was heard. The arrow shattered, and Chu Xiao's figure also took 3 steps back. Even his arm was a little numb. Staring at Seventh Uncle, Chu Xiao frowned. Seventh Uncle was definitely the strongest among the unity of heaven and man martial artists he had encountered. He was second only to the heavenly Sin branch leader and phaseless demon sex Mr. Liu, who were close to the martial Dao grandmaster level. Moreover, Seventh Uncle's 13 soul-stealing arrows were simply astonishing. He had only cultivated these 13 arrows his entire life, and this cultivation method was extremely extreme. However, each arrow represented the condensation of his entire body's strength. There were probably only a few people in the same realm who could completely block all 13 of his arrows. Just thinking about it made Chu Xiao feel that it would be troublesome to fight against such an enemy. At this moment, Seventh Uncle's surprise was no less than Chu Xiao's. He knew how powerful his 13 soul-stealing arrows were. Previously, when Lu Fengxian was able to block his arrow, it had already surprised Seventh Uncle. Now, Chu Xiao was also able to block his arrow so easily. Where did all these young talents come from? Even Seventh Uncle himself had to admit that even Xiahou Wujiang was inferior to Chu Xiao and Lu Fengxian. After Seventh Uncle attacked, Teacher Tsun no longer hesitated. The sword in his hand flashed with green and purple lightning, and he charged straight at Chu Xiao. However, Lu Fengxian, who was standing beside Chu Xiao, took the initiative to attack first. The halberd in his hand erupted with crimson moon divine light, and the halberd smashed down with great force. As he brandished it, he was like a demonic god, incomparably violent and ferocious. It formed a great contrast with his handsome appearance and gentle personality, and he was actually equally matched with Teacher Xian. At the same time, Mo Tianlin and the others were fighting with Xiahou Wujiang and the other Ba Mountain Sword sect disciples. The entire scene could be said to be extremely chaotic. On the side of the Yu Palace, Wanner said eagerly, "Senior sister, right now, everyone is attacking Chu Xiao. Why don't we also interfere?" Yan Fian frowned. "No, I already promised that Lu Fengxian. The grievances between the Yu Palace and Chu Xiao are settled. If I go back on my word, what will happen to the reputation of the Yu Palace? I know that you were angry at Chu Xiao for crushing your sword, but you need to change your temper and personality. The Yu Palace is no longer the Yu Palace of the past. Before, it was fine for you to do this, but now, not everyone in the Jianghu will give the Yu Palace face. They can fight their own battles. We will fight for the secret boxes in the armory. When we return to the Yu Palace, I will have someone make you another one." Hearing Yan Fian say this, Wanner could only purse her lips and nod. Among the young disciples of the Yu Palace, Yan Fian's prestige was very high, even higher than some of the teachers of the Yu Palace. Of course, this was not just because of her strength, but because she truly cared for her junior apprentice sisters. She did not show any favoritism or form cliques. In the eyes of some of the teachers of the Yu Palace, Yan Fian was almost the successor to the next palace master of the Yu Palace. But it would not be easy for the Yu Palace to fight for the treasures in the armory. The independent martial artists and some martial artists from small sects were weak, but they had the advantage in numbers. There was also Yin Luohua, who was slightly weaker, but was a true unity of the world martial artist. Even though Yan Fian's strength was astounding, and the other martial artists of the Yu Palace were not weak, they could not easily take the treasures in the armory. The two sides were in another chaotic battle. And at this time, Seventh Uncle picked up another arrow. Stellar energy circulated, spiraling around the arrow like a storm. Seventh Uncle's 13 soul-stealing arrows only had 13 arrows. Previously, Lu Fengxian had blocked 1 arrow, and Chu Xiao had blocked 1 arrow. Against Teacher Tsun, Seventh Uncle had only used 3 arrows to completely suppress Teacher Cn. There were still 8 arrows left. Even if these 8 arrows could not kill Chu Xiao, they would definitely seriously injure Chu Xiao. A seriously injured Chu Xiao was nothing to worry about. Focusing, Seventh Uncle's eyes suddenly burst with a bright divine light. It was like a small sun, giving people a dazzling feeling. The arrow left the bowstring, and the storm that lingered around the arrow grew larger and larger under the entanglement of the power of heaven and earth. By the time it reached in front of Chu Xiao, it had already turned into a storm tornado that was more than 30 meters wide. Its power was simply terrifying. Chu Xiao did not retreat, but advanced instead. His hand formed a wisdom fist seal, and the stellar energy domain spread out, causing the storm to become extremely slow. It was slowly sliced apart by Chu Xiao's saber force, and finally, the arrow was cut down. However, before Chu Xiao could even catch his breath, another sonic boom sounded. The second arrow had already arrived in front of Chu Xiao. Chapter 362. Seventh Uncle's arrows were unsheathed, and he only had 8 arrows left. As long as these 8 arrows could severely injure Chu Xiao, he wouldn't be able to walk out of the Tongtian Tower. The first arrow had just been blocked by Chu Xiao's wisdom fist seal, but the second arrow had already arrived in front of him. If the first arrow's storm was a violent force, then the second arrow's sharpness was unparalleled. As the arrow approached him, Chu Xiao could already feel the strong pressure coming towards him. The sharp, bone-piercing force seemed to be able to pierce through Chu Xiao. With a loud shout, Chu Xiao directly formed the great Vajra wheel seal and blasted it forward. His hands formed seals, and one seal after another landed. In the blink of an eye, he had actually blasted out more than 10 great Vajra wheel seals. Every style of the fast and slow 9 words formula consumed a lot of inner energy. As the first seal that Chu Xiao had mastered, the great Vajra wheel seal was not weak. However, compared to other seal techniques, its consumption of inner energy was considered low. Therefore, this martial art technique was also used by Chu Xiao with exceptional proficiency. However, now that Chu Xiao had blasted out more than 10 seal techniques in the blink of an eye, it consumed an abnormally large amount of inner energy for Chu Xiao. In the end, the arrow was forcefully shattered by Chu Xiao, but a trace of blood seeped out from the webbing between his thumb and index finger. Even his arms were trembling slightly. Looking at Seventh Uncle, Chu Xiao frowned. This was only the second arrow, and Seventh Uncle still had 6 arrows left. It was unknown whether he could completely block this arrow. If this continued, he would be exhausted to death by Seventh Uncle sooner or later. Therefore, after blocking the arrow, Chu Xiao immediately formed the inner binding seal. His figure instantly turned into an afterimage as he rushed towards Seventh Uncle. Right now, Chu Xiao only had one chance, and that was to engage in close combat with his Seventh Uncle. Seventh Uncle's martial arts were all in his bow and arrow. Even if he did not use the 13 soul-stealing arrows, he would directly use his internal strength aura qi to transform into invisible arrows to attack. As for the other martial arts, Chu Xiao had never seen Seventh Uncle use them. Moreover, it didn't matter even if he knew how to do it. Chu Xiao didn't believe that after his Seventh Uncle had cultivated the 13 soul-stealing arrows to this level, his other martial arts would also be so terrifying. Seventh Uncle's lips curled into a sneer as he watched Chu Xiao's figure rush over. There were very few martial artists in the Jianghu who used bows and arrows as their weapons. It could even be said that they were rare. This was because this kind of weapon was too extreme, so extreme that it was invincible from afar. However, once it was in close combat, it would be instantly killed. Seventh Uncle had been specializing in his 13 soul-stealing arrows since he was in the innate realm. He had been able to practice from the innate realm until now, and had experienced countless fierce battles without dying. Seventh Uncle naturally had his own foundation. Other people would practice other fist and leg martial arts to enhance their close combat strength, But seventh uncle was different. He went to the extreme and practiced his own 13 soul-stealing arrows. It was actually very simple to prevent the enemy from getting close. As long as he shot the enemy halfway, he would not give the enemy any chance to get close. At the moment when Chu Xiu's figure rushed over, seventh uncle suddenly grabbed 3 arrows and put them on his giant bow. The 3 arrows were surrounded by 3 different forces. One of them was surrounded by thunder, one was surrounded by cold air, and there were icicles condensing around it. The last one was as hot as fire, and even the surrounding chi of heaven and earth was burning. 3 arrows in one bow. Soul-stealing arrows. Everyone could only hear a thunderous explosion. A powerful aura immediately surrounded the entire arsenal, causing everyone to look in the direction where seventh uncle and Chu Xiu were fighting. The 3 arrows were green, blue, and red in color. They were like 3 meteors as they smashed towards Chu Xiu. The powerful aura they exuded caused everyone's expression to change. Even Teachertsen was no exception. Previously, when seventh uncle and Teachertsen were fighting, although he was suppressing Teachertsen, seventh uncle did not have the intention to kill Teacher Cien. After all, it was just an ordinary fight for treasures. The Xiahou clan did not have any enmity with the Ba Mountain sword sect. It was fine to defeat the other party, but there was no need to kill him. Moreover, danger was everywhere in the sky-reaching tower. Seventh uncle could not possibly use all his 13 soul-stealing arrows on Teacher Cien. Now that seventh uncle had shot out 3 arrows simultaneously, Teachertsen felt that even he was not 100% confident that he could withstand the might of the arrows. And right now, facing seventh uncle's 3 arrows, the pressure on Chu Xiu was even greater. These 3 arrows seemed to have sealed off all the space around Chu Xiu to dodge. Although there were only 3 arrows, they gave off a feeling of despair as if they were an inescapable net. In that instant, a bloody mist erupted around Chu Xiu. He burned his essence blood, and his hand formed the Dugu seal. His stellar energy formed a shield, and he was as immovable as a mountain. Boundless power of blood seeped into the stellar energy shield, causing Chu Xiu's body to be shrouded in a boundless bloody color. The 3 arrows with different powers shot towards Chu Xiu's Dugu seal. The power that exploded in that instant caused the entire arsenal to tremble. Chu Xiu's figure was forced back by the 3 arrows. With each step, his footsteps were deeply imprinted on the ground, leaving footprints and cracks more than a foot deep. After taking more than 10 steps back, the Dugu seal in front of Chu Xiu finally shattered. However, the 3 arrows had also exhausted their power and fell to the ground. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned deathly pale. Chu Xiu's Dugu seal was mainly a defensive secret technique that could withstand stellar energy. However, it might not be able to withstand the violent fluctuations of stellar energy when they exchanged blows. Under seventh uncle's 3 arrows, Chu Xiu's internal organs were injured, and he was directly injured by the shock. The power of this strike was so great that the power of the 3 arrows was condensed into a single point. Even Chu Xiu had never seen this from the Heavenly Sin Branch Lord or Mr. Liu. If it were some weaker unity of the world realm martial artists, they would probably have been killed by these 3 arrows. Seventh uncle held another arrow in his hand. He looked at Chu Xiu, who was spitting blood, and said lightly, "It's already not easy for you to block 6 of my 13 soul-stealing arrows. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see the next 3 arrows." From seventh uncle's point of view, Chu Xiu was already seriously injured, and he was confident that he could kill Chu Xiu within 2 arrows. The last arrow of the 13 soul-stealing arrows was indeed not something that Chu Xiu would be able to see. There was a sharp, scarlet killing intent coiled around the arrow. In fact, seventh uncle's arrows carried a different amount of power. The 13 soul-stealing arrows was not just a martial art. It included 13 different variations. This arrow burst out, and its killing intent soared to the sky. Even the silver-white arrow was dyed scarlet red. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu did not choose to dodge. Instead, he stared at the arrow and used the heaven sun gazing at air skill to its limit. His mental strength was greatly depleted, and there was even a sharp pain in his mind. At this moment, in Chu Xiu's eyes, there was not a single flaw in seventh uncle's arrow. It was the pinnacle of power, and it could be said to be invulnerable. This level of heaven sun gazing at air skill was not enough. A glimmer of light shone in Chu Xiu's eyes, and 2 streaks of blood flowed out from the bottom of his eyes. However, Chu Xiu did not even blink. At this moment, in Chu Xiu's eyes, there were dense lines twisting on the arrow that represented power. However, when he used the heaven's sun gazing at air skill to its limit, those lines began to lengthen and twist. At this moment, Chu Xiu seemed to have stepped into a new world. He saw it. Those lengthening lines did not represent the present, but the future. It was the path of Seventh Uncle's arrow. The heaven's sun gazing at air skill's power was restrained, and ordinary people would not be able to see through Chu Xiu's abnormality. In the eyes of the crowd, after Seventh Uncle shot this arrow, Chu Xiu stood there foolishly, as if he had given up resisting and was ready to die. Lu Fengxian, who was fighting with Teacher Tsin, widened her eyes. She wanted to save Chu Xiu, but she was firmly entangled by Teacher Tsin and could not escape. Xie Xiao Lu, Mo Tianlin, and the others wanted to save Chu Xiu, but faced with Seventh Uncle's arrow, they did not have the strength to do so. Yin Luohua, the leader of the Thundercloud stronghold, Chen Yun, and the others, who had suffered at the hands of Chu Xiu, were secretly sneering. Weren't you Chu Xiu arrogant? Weren't you overbearing? Weren't you looking down on everyone? What about now? You're still going to die here. However, the next scene caused everyone to widen their eyes in disbelief. Seventh Uncle's arrow was less than 10 feet away from Chu Xiu, but Chu Xiu suddenly stepped 3 feet in one direction. It was at this distance of 3 feet that the arrow narrowly brushed past Chu Xiu. Even the astral energy on the arrow barely brushed past Chu Xiu's protective astral energy. There was not the slightest bit of conflict. Seventh Uncle's eyes revealed a look of shock. However, this was not the end. The 13 soul-stealing arrows chased after the soul. Without blood, how could it be so easily dodged? After the arrow missed, a glaring red glow of murderous intent erupted from the arrow. It actually turned around and continued to stab towards Chu Xiu's back. Chu Xiu did not even look back. He once again took a step in another direction, and the arrow once again brushed past Chu Xiu's body. After missing for the second time, the arrow turned around again, but the result was the same. It still missed. After being dodged by Chu Xiu 3 times in a row, the stellar energy attached to the arrow was no longer enough to make it turn around again. The arrow was directly nailed into the wall of the armory. The force was still astonishing, and it was directly nailed into the wall, leaving only a tail feather trembling. Everyone present looked at Chu Xiu, then at Seventh Uncle. They could not figure out what was going on. With a warrior's speed, it was very easy to dodge ordinary arrows because the trajectory of the arrows was fixed. However, Seventh Uncle's 13 soul-stealing arrows were attached with stellar energy. They chased after the soul and directly locked onto Chu Xiu. Their trajectories were constantly changing, but Chu Xiu was able to dodge them every time. The stellar energy on the arrow was exhausted, so it could no longer lock onto Chu Xiu. It was as if Seventh Uncle was acting with Chu Xiu. It was simply incredible. Chapter 363. The Heaven Sun's gazing at air technique could be said to be the most difficult technique that Chu Xiu had ever cultivated. He had no clue at all. The last time Chu Xiu faced Feng Wuling, who was at the oneness of heaven and man realm, when he was at the three-flower realm at one's prominence. It could be said that he had only managed to cultivate the Heaven Sun's gazing at air technique to the entry level under great pressure. After that, Chu Xiu had studied the Heaven Sun's gazing at air technique when he was in seclusion or when he had nothing to do. However, he had no clue at all. It wasn't until now, when Chu Xiu was fighting with the Seventh Uncle and under the great pressure of the 13 soul-stealing arrows, that the Heaven Sun's gazing at air technique had finally broken through to the entry level. He could now initially display the powerful power of the Heaven's gazing at air technique. Heaven's gazing at air. Killing while talking. The Heaven Sun's gazing at air technique had never been used to find the opponent's flaws. Instead, it was used to predict the trajectory of the opponent's attack. A single leaf could tell autumn by understanding all of the opponent's attacks and killing while talking. The entry-level Heaven Sun's gazing at air technique could not reach such a terrifying level. However, Chu Xiu was already able to see the trajectory of the Seventh Uncle's attack and dodge the arrow before it reached him. No matter how the Seventh Uncle changed the direction of the arrow, it was useless. Everything was within Chu Xiu's expectations. It could be said that the Heaven Sun's gazing at air technique had the greatest restraining effect on a warrior like the Seventh Uncle. Of course, the way to break the Heaven's gazing at air technique was very simple. The Seventh Uncle's arrow had reached an extreme speed. Even if Chu Xiao saw the trajectory of the arrow, he would not be able to dodge it. Unfortunately, the seventh uncle was not fast enough, and Chu Xiao was not slow either. The Heaven Sun's gazing at air technique was originally only a supplementary technique. The stronger one was, the greater the power that the Heaven Sun's gazing at air technique could create. On the other hand, no matter how many things Chu Xiao saw, it was useless because he had no ability to block or dodge these attacks. At this moment, the seventh uncle gritted his teeth as he looked at Chu Xiao, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. It was not that no one could resist his 13 soul-stealing arrows. In fact, the way to resist the 13 soul-stealing arrows was very simple. Just like what Chu Xiao had done before, he could directly use his own strength to resist the arrows and destroy all the gang qi on the arrows. But the problem was that seventh uncle never expected that someone would be able to dodge his arrows in such a situation. Chu Xiao's speed didn't change, but it was as if he had discussed it with Chu Xiao. It just so happened that the power of his arrow had reached a limit, and he couldn't dodge after changing directions. Even the range of his stellar energy had been calculated by Chu Xiao. Wherever the arrow passed, it didn't cause any damage to Chu Xiao. Then what exactly was going on? If it wasn't Chu Xiao's speed that was too fast, could it be that his arrows were too slow? Seeing that Chu Xiao's figure was quickly approaching, seventh uncle had no time to think. He still had 2 arrows in his hand. He stood still, drew his bow, nocked an arrow and shot. This series of actions was like an afterimage, and the speed was extremely fast. The arrow was almost in front of Chu Xiao the moment it left the bowstring. However, the sharp-eyed people present could already see that Chu Xiao had already moved the moment seventh uncle drew his bow and nocked an arrow. The moment he moved his feet, the arrow had already streaked past him. This kind of prediction was simply terrifying. This arrow was the same as the previous one. It went back and forth twice, but it still couldn't hurt Chu Xiao. The power on the arrow had been exhausted, and it was nailed to the wall. Seeing that Chu Xiao's figure was getting closer and closer, seventh uncle aimed his last arrow at Chu Xiao. However, this arrow didn't leave the bowstring, and cold sweat was already rolling down seventh uncle's head. It wasn't that seventh uncle didn't want to shoot this arrow, but that even if he shot it, he wouldn't be able to hurt Chu Xiao. He simply didn't know how to break out of Chu Xiao's current strange state. Before the arrow left the bowstring, seventh uncle directly yelled at Xiahou Wujiang, "Young master, run!" Seventh uncle wasn't seriously injured, but he knew that once Chu Xiao got close to him, 90% of his martial arts would be crippled. At that time, Xiahou Wujiang would also be in danger. Xiahou Wujiang, who was fighting with Mo Tianlin and the others, saw the situation on seventh uncle's side. He gritted his teeth, and his eyes revealed a look of unwillingness. Xiahou Wujiang was really unwilling. He finally had such a good opportunity, but in the end, he still couldn't kill Chu Xiao. This even made Xiahou Wujiang doubt whether this Chu Xiao was really his nemesis in life. At the God Weapon Conference, he originally wanted to humiliate Mo Tianlin, but the result was that Chu Xiao's interference was unsettled, and his ranking on the Longhu list fell. Later, he wanted to instigate the martial artists of Eastern Qi to kill Chu Xiao, but the result was that Chu Xiao's fame spread all over the world, and his reputation plummeted. He was ridiculed by others. This time, Xiahou Wujiang thought that he had acted decisively enough. He decisively gave up the treasures in the sky-reaching tower in exchange for joining forces with Teacher Chen to kill Chu Xiao. In the end, Chu Xiao still turned the tables. Xiahou Wujiang really couldn't understand why this was happening. However, the current situation didn't give Xiahou Wujiang the time to ask why, and he didn't have time to delay. Golden light erupted from his body, and his powerful mental energy directly shook Missouri Tianlin and the others back. Xiahou Wujiang's figure immediately fled. A hint of killing intent appeared in Chu Xiao's eyes. He looked at seventh uncle and sneered. Xiahou Wujiang is very decisive in escaping. You told him to escape, and he fled. He doesn't care about your life or death at all. Seventh uncle's last arrow was always aimed at Chu Xiao. He knew that his arrow would most likely miss, so he only shot this arrow in case Chu Xiao abandoned him to chase after Xiahou Wujiang. Hearing this, seventh uncle said indifferently, "My life was given by the family head. In this life, I will go through fire and water for the Xiahou family. As long as young master escapes, I won't disappoint the family head for saving my life. Moreover, Although I don't know what method you used to avoid my 13 deadly arrows, do you really think that I don't know anything else besides the bow and arrow? Young master won't die, and you can't kill me either. Chu Xiao formed the internal binding seal, and his figure appeared in front of seventh uncle in an instant. He slashed out with a demonic saber in his hand, and the demonic saber light instantly enveloped seventh uncle. Since you're so confident, then I'll send you on your way today. Seeing the surging demonic saber light in front of him, seventh uncle's eyes revealed a hint of ruthlessness. He didn't shoot his last arrow. Seventh uncle pressed the giant bow in his hand, and a series of mechanical sounds appeared. In the blink of an eye, the giant bow turned into a short spear, and the arrow was the tip of the spear. His giant bow was called Xuanji, and it was forged according to the ancient Chenji sect's divine weapon, the Xuanji transformation. According to legend, the ancient divine weapon, the Xuanji transformation, could change its form at will, and it could evolve into 18 kinds of weapons. It was very agile. Seventh uncle's Xuanji transformation was a replica, and it only had 3 forms. Normally, it was just an iron box that was convenient to carry around. Its main body was the arrow and the bow, and when it was in close combat, the giant bow could be used as a short stick or a short spear. However, seventh uncle had never used the last form because he had almost never been forced into such a desperate situation. The spear light swept out, and seventh uncle struggled to resist Chu Xiao's demonic saber light. Seventh uncle didn't lie. He did no other things besides the bow, and his spear skills were proof. Unfortunately, compared to his amazing 13 soul-stealing arrows, his spear skills were too mediocre. It was so mediocre that one couldn't bear to look at it. Without the 13 soul-stealing arrows, it was difficult for seventh uncle to exert even 90% of his strength. Under Chu Xiao's Avicii Path's 3 blades, he was forced to retreat step by step. As Chu Xiao's saber fell, the 3-layered Avicii demon blade condensed into one. With a loud bang, seventh uncle was directly hit, and he was sent flying while vomiting blood. Seeing Chu Xiao's figure once again holding a saber, seventh uncle couldn't help but secretly curse him as a monster. His previous arrows had already seriously injured Chu Xiao, and his internal organs were already injured. Yet, he was still able to erupt with such a level of power. If this wasn't a monster, what was? In fact, seventh uncle had underestimated Chu Xiao. With the glazed golden thread goo and the internal lion seal suppressing his injuries, Chu Xiao's internal organs were indeed injured, but his injuries weren't as serious as seventh uncle had imagined. He still had the strength to fight. On the other hand, seventh uncle's 13 soul-snatching arrows had consumed a lot of his gang energy and inner force. Coupled with his mediocre spear technique, he was completely suppressed when he fought with Chu Xiao. He had already been bombarded to the point of vomiting blood. Seeing that he could no longer resist, seventh uncle estimated that Xiahou Wujiang would be able to escape from heaven-reaching tower. When Chu Xiao's body shone with demonic aura and slashed again, the short spear in his hand suddenly changed. It split into 2, revealing the bowstring in the middle. It directly cut through the stellar energy and enveloped the heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiao's hand. The 2 parts of the spear body began to disintegrate, turning into countless hidden weapons that covered the sky and earth, rushing towards Chu Xiao. Although Heaven's Sun gazing at air did not consume internal strength, it consumed an abnormally large amount of mental strength. Thus, Chu Xiao could not maintain the state of Heaven's Sun gazing at air all the time. Thus, seventh uncle's move was something that Chu Xiao did not expect. Similarly, this was seventh uncle's trump card. It could not be considered a transformation, and could only be said to be a last-ditch effort to abandon his weapon. With the bowstring wrapped around the heavenly demon dance, and the hidden weapons that came swarming towards him, Chu Xiao had no choice but to temporarily abandon his saber and use the Dugu seal to defend himself. By the time he blocked all these hidden weapons, seventh uncle had already burst out with his fastest speed and escaped out of the arsenal. Chu Xiao took a step forward and arrived first despite moving later. His speed was almost extremely fast, and he blasted out the annihilating heaven and earth obliterating oblivion killing fist. When the fist force landed, the killing intent had already blasted into seventh uncle's back, causing him to immediately spit out a mouthful of blood mixed with fragments of his internal organs. In the blink of an eye, his fist turned into a palm, and the annihilating heaven and earth obliterating great purple sun palm fell. Immediately, the evil purple sun demonic flame entered his body, causing seventh uncle to spit out another mouthful of blood that was stained with purplish-black demonic aura. However, seventh uncle's desire to live was really strong to the extreme. After being hit by Chu Xiu's fist and palm, he forcibly received the entire force. Using this force, his figure directly leaped out of the arsenal and disappeared into the fog. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.